Hi guys, and welcome to Last Light Radio channel. Tonight we step into an America that speaks endlessly about liberty, while building entire mornings out of control. You open your eyes in 1840, and almost at once the day asks a hard question. What does it feel like to live where your body can be counted, directed, searched, punished, or priced before breakfast? The air is still cool. The sky is only beginning to pale. Somewhere a rooster calls, a wagon creaks, and a door opens on its iron hinges. The country around you is full of church bells, courtrooms, cotton bales, polished speeches, and quiet terror. So, before you settle into the story, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, and while you're here, comment below with your location and your local time. Now, dim the lights and let the dark settle softly around you as you enter a world where even the first breath of morning can belong to someone else. You wake early because many black Americans in 1840 do not control the hour of waking. Morning is not a gentle idea. It is an order. It arrives in the scrape of boots, the crack of a whip in the distance, the rattle of a latch, or the simple fear of being found still lying down. In the South, most black people are enslaved, and that single fact shapes every corner of the day. By 1840, millions live in bondage across the United States, especially in the plantation regions of the South, where cotton, tobacco, rice, and sugar pull wealth from land through human labour. Wealth glitters elsewhere. Your dawn does not. The first feeling may be cold. Bare feet on rough boards, damp straw, thin cloth against skin that never quite forgets yesterday's sweat. Then comes smell, wood smoke, mud, ash, salt pork, stale cornmeal, wet wool. In some places, the scent of river water. In others, the thick sweetness of cane fields or the dusty dryness of cotton houses. Even before the sun rises high enough to warm the road, the day has a texture, splinters, chapped hands, tight shoulders, a jaw already set if you're enslaved. Another person may claim the right to ask where you're going, why you're standing still, whom you spoke to, and whether you seem respectful enough while answering. That is the constant truth running beneath the ordinary sounds. Control is not only punishment, it is repetition. It is being watched so steadily that caution starts to feel like breathing. You learn how a face should look, not too slow, not too bold, not too blank, not too clever. The performance is exhausting. It begins almost as soon as consciousness returns. Some live on large plantations, where rows of cabins sit a careful distance from the big house, close enough to supervise and far enough to separate. Others live on small farms, in town alleys, behind shops, near docks, or beside kitchens and stables. The setting changes, the imbalance does not. In cities such as Charleston, New Orleans, Richmond, or Baltimore, enslaved people might hire out, labour on streets, load ships, cook in hotels, or work in skilled trades. It can look, from a great distance, almost like independence. It is not. Coins may pass through your hands without ever becoming yours. A pass may allow movement without granting safety. A task may require skill without earning respect. You also live inside rules that can shift from county to county and mood to mood. A law may exist on paper. Another may live only in the habits of white men who expect obedience. In many places, black gatherings are restricted. Reading may be forbidden or treated with deep suspicion. Travelling without permission can bring interrogation, beating, or jail. Night movement is especially dangerous. Patrols ride roads, peer into yards, listen for voices, and demand proof that your steps belong where they are stepping. Sleep becomes a shallow thing when the night itself can inspect you. For free black Americans, the morning is different, but not easy. Freedom papers may be folded and hidden carefully, protected from rain, theft, or a careless tear. Your body may be legally your own, yet still treated as suspect in streets, markets, ferries, and courtrooms. A free black sailor, carpenter, washerwoman, preacher, or labourer may wake before dawn with responsibilities familiar to anyone building a life: rent, food, children, work. But over all of it hangs another burden. Can your freedom be proved today to the satisfaction of a stranger who already doubts it? That is not a small question. It decides whether breakfast is interrupted by insult, arrest, or worse. You notice quickly that control is often quiet before it becomes loud. It sits in posture. A white child expects deference. A shopkeeper watches your hands. A clerk delays service. A constable asks for papers with fake politeness. A mistress rings a bell. An overseer glances at the field and says nothing, which can be more unsettling than shouting. You learn to read weather in faces. You hear danger in pauses. Survival asks for interpretation as much as endurance, and yet the world is not only oppression in broad strokes, it is also made of small human details. Someone coughs in the next cabin, a kettle hisses, a baby fusses and is rocked back into drowsy silence. A woman braids another's hair by touch in the dim light. A man rubs stiffness from his wrists before work. Someone saves a crumb for later. Someone smooths a torn sleeve. These are modest acts. They matter. Systems of control thrive on turning people into numbers, tools, or property. Daily care quietly refuses that lie. Breakfast, if there is time and enough food, may be plain and repetitive. Cornbread, mush, molasses if luck leans your way, salt meat in small portions, sometimes sweet potatoes, sometimes nothing until later. Food is fuel first, pleasure second, if it appears at all. On plantations, rations often determine the shape of hunger. Gardens, fishing, trapping, and careful saving can make the difference between weakness and survival. Scholars still debate how much autonomy enslaved people held through these side economies, because records kept by slaveholders often shrink or distort what enslaved communities themselves managed to build. The paper trail is smug. Real life was more resourceful. Children wake too. That may be the hardest sight. In 1840, childhood for black children is heavily shaped by status, location, and the demands of white households. Some very young children begin with small chores and graduate quickly into harder labour, carrying water, watching infants, scaring birds from crops, sweeping yards, fetching kindling, running errands. In free black families, parents may push urgently for literacy, church teaching, craft skills, and habits of self-possession. Knowing the wider world will try to deny every one of those things, childhood exists. It is simply never allowed to be innocent for long. There is also dress. Clothing issued to the enslaved is often coarse, ill-fitting, and seasonal only in theory. Linen, wool, rough shoes when available, patched garments passed down and worn thin. What touches your skin can chafe all day. In towns, free black people may dress with striking care when possible, using neat coats, hats, shawls, polished shoes, and clean collars as declarations of dignity. This is not vanity. It is armour. In a society determined to rank human worth by colour, bearing becomes argument. As daylight strengthens, labour pulls everyone outward. Field hands move in lines. Domestic workers cross thresholds into kitchens and bedrooms they maintain but do not own. Boatmen head toward rivers, brickmakers, blacksmiths, draymen, coopers, laundresses, seamstresses, and dock labourers move toward tasks that keep the national economy humming. Cotton in particular drives enormous expansion during these years. Bales move to ports, ports to ships, ships to mills, and the profits rise elegantly on ledgers far removed from the bodies that make them possible. You can almost hear the country's hypocrisy stretching its back. There is a strange tidbit from the time that fits this world too well. Some white Americans delighted in pseudo-scientific measurements of black bodies, as if calipers and charts could transform prejudice into truth. It was nonsense dressed in academic clothes. Yet in parlours and lecture halls, such ideas could sound respectable. That is one of the more chilling features of the period. Control does not rely only on chains and patrols. It also recruits newspapers, sermons, jokes, textbooks, and polished men with serious voices. Ridiculous theories can do real damage when society is eager to believe them. Religion sits everywhere in this landscape, though not always kindly. White ministers may preach obedience to the enslaved and paternal duty to the enslaver, wrapping domination in scripture and smoothing cruelty with pious language. At the same time, black worship creates space for emotional truth, coded hope, communal mourning, and stubborn joy. A hymn can carry more than melody. A prayer can say two things at once. Historians continue to disagree about exactly how openly resistance was voiced in early black religious life from place to place, because surveillance was uneven and much had to be hidden in plain hearing. Silence kept many records unwritten. Memory did the rest. Even names can be unstable here. Some people carry names chosen by parents and names imposed by owners. Some are called by childhood nicknames in one place and formal names in another. To be renamed is no small insult. It is a theft of continuity. Yet people still preserve family names in whispers, kinship terms in kitchens, old stories in fragments, and identities in the careful way one person introduces another when no white ear is near. You may also notice how geography changes the pressure but never removes it. In the Chesapeake, tobacco landscapes and older plantation patterns shape routines. In the Deep South, cotton expansion and forced migration have torn countless people away from earlier homes. In Louisiana, French, Spanish, African, and Anglo influences mingle in ways that complicate colour lines without softening power. In northern cities, free black neighbourhoods grow institutions such as churches, mutual aid societies, and schools. But hostile laws and white mobs remain an ever-present threat. Freedom in one district can evaporate at the edge of the next street. Through all this, emotional life persists with astonishing complexity. People laugh. Of course they do. Someone teases a friend over a crooked hat. Someone rolls their eyes at a pompous overseer the second his back turns. Gentle sarcasm survives even where liberty does not. Human beings remain gloriously inconvenient that way. A controlling system wants obedience, predictability, flattening. Instead, it gets humour, longing, style, flirtation, pride, mischief, prayer, grief, memory, and the maddening refusal of people to become simple. Still, fear stays close. Sale, beating, jail, kidnapping, family separation, debt, false accusation. Every black American in 1840 lives near some version of these possibilities, whether enslaved or free. The difference is often legal condition, not freedom from white power. A free black man in the North may fear kidnappers working on behalf of slave catchers. An enslaved woman in the South may fear being moved suddenly to another state. A black child may grow up learning, much too early, that adults lower their voices for reasons that have names too heavy to say aloud. As the morning settles into full day, you understand the central fact of this life under constant control. Domination is not merely an occasional blow, it is an environment. It arranges time, movement, speech, family, work, clothing, food, sleep, and risk. It tries to reach inside the mind and make limitation feel natural, but natural is not the right word. Artificial is, forced is, maintained is. Every lane, ledger, patrol route, and courthouse ritual has been built by choices, and within that built world, black Americans continue to choose too. They choose how to greet one another, how to preserve tenderness, how to hold information, how to notice beauty even when the day begins in hardship. Sunrise still spills gold over fence posts. Birds still lift from reeds. River mist still curls low over the bank. A child still leans into a mother's side for warmth. Someone still hums while tying a headscarf. Someone still straightens their back before stepping outside. The nation would like you to believe power is the only thing worth seeing. But when you stand quietly in this 1840 dawn, listening to buckets clink, insects buzz, distant wheels grind against packed earth, and breathing in smoke, sweat, pine, and wet soil, another truth emerges. Control is vast. It is cruel. It is everywhere. Yet it never fully owns the inner life of the people it tries to command. That private country remains harder to map, harder to seize, and impossible to completely erase. By the time the sun has climbed above the trees, the world around you is already speaking in rules. Some are written in statute books, some live in courthouse habits, some travel by rumour, threat, and the squint of a suspicious stranger. For black Americans in 1840, especially in the slaveholding South, law is not a distant institution wearing a powdered wig and a painting. It is immediate. It can stop you on a road, enter a yard at night, demand a paper, question a glance, and punish a hesitation. It can be carried in a saddlebag, nailed to a post, or spoken by a man who never learned much beyond his own authority. Somehow he still feels qualified to judge your entire existence. History offers many such men, sleepy, smug, and wildly overconfident. You come to understand quickly that movement itself can be treated as suspicious. To walk from one place to another is never just walking. It is subject to permission. On many plantations and in many counties, an enslaved person travelling beyond a familiar boundary needs a pass. This small sheet of paper can decide whether a road is merely dusty or suddenly dangerous. A pass may state a name, a destination, a reason, and sometimes a time by which the person must return. Without it, every hoofbeat behind you can make your stomach tighten. Every lantern swinging in the dark can become a threat. The pass system turns ordinary geography into a trap. A bridge, a crossroads, a ferry, a lane between fields. All can become checkpoints in a life that is supposed to belong to someone else. White patrols, constables, or self-appointed guardians of public order may stop travellers and inspect their papers. The inspection is never neutral. Even a valid pass does not guarantee safety. A man can decide the handwriting looks wrong. He can say the hour is too late. He can say your face seems insolent. There is always room inside arbitrary power for fresh invention. Patrols are a constant feature of this landscape. In many southern states, patrol systems are organised specifically to police enslaved people. These patrols ride roads, search quarters, break up gatherings, and look for anyone outside approved control. The sound arrives first, hooves thudding against hard ground, leather creaking, bits clinking softly in horses' mouths, a dog's bark cutting through the dark, then the light, a lantern beam flickering across fence rails, tree trunks, and startled faces. Night is supposed to bring rest. Here, it also brings inspection. The legal structure behind these patrols differs from place to place, but the purpose stays painfully clear. White authorities claim they are preventing theft, disorder, rebellion, or escape. In practice, they are enforcing a racial system built on fear. Every visit reminds black communities that privacy is fragile. A cabin door can open inward on command. A prayer meeting can be interrupted. A family meal can be questioned. Even free black people may be challenged, especially if they are unfamiliar in an area or travelling at odd hours. Legal freedom can slow abuse. It does not banish it. Paper becomes almost sacred under these conditions. Freedom papers must be guarded from rain, fire, loss, and theft. Certificates of manumission, passes signed by employers, sailor protections, apprenticeship records, licenses, tax receipts, and letters of character all gather importance far beyond their size. A folded document tucked inside a hat lining or sewn into clothing can serve as a shield. A weak shield, sadly. But a shield all the same. To lose such a paper is not a clerical inconvenience. It can trigger arrest, beating, detention, or sail into slavery if the wrong people decide your word is worthless. Many do. That cruel dependence on paperwork creates a strange irony. A nation full of speeches about natural rights often demands that black people prove their humanity through ink and signatures. Your face is not enough. Your memory is not enough. Your family is not enough. The written word, controlled by a society that frequently bars black literacy, becomes the gatekeeper of movement and safety. There is a bitter joke hiding there, though few are in the mood to laugh. In towns and cities, regulation becomes even more layered. Streets are crowded with ordinances about curfews, assembly, commerce, and conduct. A free black craftsman may need licenses or white references to secure steady work. A black preacher may need permission to hold a meeting, especially if too many listeners gather. A washerwoman carrying laundry through town may be judged by where she walks, how long she pauses, and whom she speaks to at a corner. Public space is not really public. It is filtered through white assumptions about who belongs, who serves, and who must explain themselves. One of the most intrusive controls falls on social gathering. Authorities in many places fear black assemblies, particularly after dark. Meetings for worship, mourning, celebration, courtship, or mutual aid can be treated as suspicious simply because black people are present together without white supervision. The law often claims to fear conspiracy. In reality, white power fears community. It fears information passing hand to hand. It fears confidence. It fears people recognizing themselves as more than isolated labourers. That fear shapes rules against drums, nighttime meetings, independent preaching, and unsupervised travel. There is a practical side to these restrictions that sinks into daily nerves. A mother wishing to visit a husband on another plantation may need permission that is delayed or denied. A brother hoping to see a sick sister in a neighbouring county may have no safe route. A free black family planning a church attendance or a burial must consider whether the road home after dusk will expose them to harassment. Distance becomes emotional as well as physical. 2 miles can feel longer than an ocean when every step requires explanation. Curfews sharpen the pressure. In many places, black people found out after a certain hour may be stopped, whipped, jailed, or otherwise punished unless they carry proper authorization. Evening air cools the skin, insects buzz in the grass, and lamps begin glowing in windows. But the beauty of night offers no comfort if the road itself has become a legal hazard. Even in cities, where movement seems fuller and more anonymous, darkness can draw more attention rather than less. A free black sailor returning late from the docks may be treated as a criminal until he proves otherwise. A domestic worker sent out on an errand may pray the paper in her hand satisfies whoever questions her. These rules also produce an economy of intermediaries. White employers, masters, mistresses, sheriffs, clerks, and justices of the peace become gatekeepers to ordinary life. Need to travel. Ask. Need proof of status. Ask. Need permission to gather. Ask. Need someone to vouch for your character. Ask. Need a record copied or corrected. Ask. Each request offers another opportunity for refusal, humiliation, or extortion. Dependence is built into the design. The system wants black people to remain visible and vulnerable while making white approval feel like a favour rather than a mechanism of control. Children absorb this early. They learn which roads are risky, which white households are least dangerous, what tone to use when addressed, and when to lower their eyes. They learn that paper matters, that strangers can question them, and that a message carried from one place to another may need exact wording. Some young people become astonishingly skilled at reading adult tensions. A child notices who stiffens at hoofbeats, who hides a folded note, who falls silent when unknown voices approach the door. Education happens everywhere, even in fear. There are also local variations that make life maddeningly unpredictable. One county may enforce patrols aggressively, another may depend more on informal white surveillance. A city may allow some hired-out labour under written contracts, while a nearby district imposes stricter registration. New Orleans, Charleston, Baltimore, and Richmond each have their own legal cultures, shaped by trade, population, and local politics. Rural areas often run on custom as much as code. Historians still argue over how consistently many of these regulations were applied, because enforcement depended on geography, class, labour demands, and the personality of officials. Inconsistency is not mercy. It is another source of anxiety. That uncertainty touches free black communities especially hard. Freedom exists, but it is hemmed in by registration laws, special taxes, discriminatory testimony rules, and the constant threat of kidnapping. Some states require free black people to carry proof of status at all times. Some demand that newly freed people leave the state altogether. Others restrict firearm ownership, voting, jury service, schooling, and public assembly. A free black person can build a household, attend church, work steadily, and still understand that one hostile official may unravel everything. Liberty with conditions is liberty leaning on a crutch. The threat of kidnapping is particularly chilling. Free black people in both North and South know that abductors may seize them and claim they're fugitives. Ports, roads, and border regions carry special danger. A person travelling alone may disappear into the slave market machinery with terrifying speed. This is why community knowledge matters so deeply. People keep track of faces, rumours, suspicious wagons, unknown traders, and officials with bad reputations. They warn one another in whispers and side glances. Formal law may fail. Informal alertness steps in where it can. The courtroom offers little comfort. In many jurisdictions, black testimony against white people is limited or barred, especially in cases involving status, violence, or contract disputes. Imagine the insult. You can be stopped, searched, struck, and accused. Yet your own voice may carry reduced value before the law. Justice arrives wearing a blindfold in paintings. But around here she peeks under the cloth and checks colour first. It is a brutal lesson in how legal systems can present themselves as neutral while serving a deeply unequal order. Even labour contracts can become tools of coercion. Free black workers may be bound by exploitative terms, denied wages, or threatened with arrest for breach of contract or alleged vagrancy. A written agreement should protect. Sometimes it traps. Employers know that many black workers have limited access to courts and fewer powerful allies. So wages are delayed, housing tied to employment becomes precarious, and dismissal can place an entire family near hunger. Economic control and legal control work together like old friends who never need introductions. Despite all this, people become remarkably skilled at navigating the maze. Routes are memorized, trusted households are noted, safe ferrymen, sympathetic clerks, reliable employers, discreet ministers, and literate neighbours form a map more valuable than anything printed. Women carrying baskets may tuck messages beneath cloth. Men on hired labour may exchange news at workshops or docks. Church networks pass warnings. Mutual aid groups help retrieve papers, raise bail, or support the jailed. None of this removes danger. It does make life less solitary. A quirky detail from the era shows how absurd control can become. In some places, local authorities worried over clothing, badges, or visible markers that might distinguish status or occupation, as though a hat brim or coat cut could settle the question of who belonged where. Societies obsessed with hierarchy often become strangely theatrical. They want every person correctly costumed for the role assigned to them. The tragedy is real, even when the obsession looks faintly ridiculous. The emotional effect of living inside constant regulation is hard to overstate. You begin to measure your own body as others do. Are your steps too fast? Is your answer too slow? Does your pocket contain the paper? Did the ink smear? Did the past name the correct destination? Did you remember the exact wording if asked? Vigilance settles in the shoulders and behind the eyes. It is tiring in a way deep sleep cannot fix. This is not just fear of punishment, it is the draining effort of being continuously legible to power, and yet rule-bound societies never achieve complete control. People bend time, improvise stories, borrow papers, create plausible reasons, and rely on one another's intelligence. They memorize signatures, imitate confidence, and learn which officials are lazy, which are greedy, and which are easiest to flatter. Such strategies carry risk, but they reveal something important. Oppressive systems may be elaborate. They are not all-knowing. They leak. They depend on human beings, and human beings are inconsistent creatures, often distracted by vanity, drink, weather, dinner, or their own very inflated sense of importance. As afternoon light stretches across roads and doorsteps, the legal web remains taut around daily life. A paper may permit one journey and forbid another. A curfew may cut short a visit. A patrol may turn prayer into danger. A registration line may consume half a day. A clerk's shrug may decide whether freedom feels documented or doubtful. The rules are many because the goal is total reach, not simply labour, but motion. Not simply obedience, but anticipation. Not simply punishment, but self-monitoring. So you move carefully through this 1840 world of signatures, patrol routes, licenses, curfews, and suspicious eyes. Dust clings to your shoes, sweat cools at the back of your neck, crickets start their evening music in the weeds, somewhere nearby. A page is folded and hidden once more. It is only paper. It is also a boundary between one kind of danger and another. That is what control looks like here. Thin sheets, hard roads, armed riders, and the exhausting demand to prove, again and again, that you have the right to stand where you are standing. Once the rules of the road and the weight of papers have done their work, the day turns fully toward labour. In 1840, for black Americans, work is not simply a task waiting on a list. It is the structure of daylight itself. It begins early, stretches long, and settles into the body with a heaviness that can feel older than the person carrying it. The hands tell the story first. Cracked knuckles, sore palms, nails split at the edge, then the back joins in, followed by shoulders, knees, and feet. By noon, your whole frame may feel like a tool that somebody else has been using carelessly. If you are enslaved on a cotton plantation, the rhythm is relentless. Cotton culture is already transforming the South into an enormous machine of planting, hoeing, picking, ginning, weighing, and shipping. The field seems endless when you stand inside it. Rows press forward under the heat, green early in the season, then white with bursting bolls later on. The cotton itself can look soft from a distance, almost cloud-like. Your fingers learn better. The dried husks are sharp. They scratch skin, catch on sleeves, and leave tiny cuts that sting when sweat reaches them. So much of history comes packaged as wealth, only after someone else has done the bleeding. The work changes with the agricultural calendar. Planting requires steady pace and careful spacing. Weeding demands endless bending, the kind that draws fire through the lower spine. Chopping and hoeing build a rhythm of metal against soil, blunt and repetitive. Picking is its own trial. You move fast because the weight collected is measured, compared, judged. The sack drags behind or across the shoulder. Dust rises in the dry patches. Insects hover near the face. The sun presses down with the blunt confidence of something that knows nobody can argue with it. On plantations growing tobacco, rice, or sugar, the labour takes different shapes but remains equally punishing. Tobacco work involves transplanting, hoeing, topping, worming, cutting, hanging, and curing. The leaves are sticky in the hands and strong in smell, earthy and bitter at once. Rice cultivation often means standing in wet ground, with mud pulling at the ankles and insects making cheerful little meals out of every exposed inch of skin. Sugar labour can be especially exhausting during grinding season, when cutting cane and processing it under intense pressure leaves little room for rest. The cane fields rustle in the wind. Pretty sound. Miserable implications. The gang labour system, common on many large southern plantations, organises workers into groups under the direction of an overseer or driver. This arrangement allows the workday to move with a collective pace, often driven by the speed expected of the strongest or most watched labourers. Falling behind does not remain private for long. It becomes visible, and visibility under slavery is rarely a blessing. Some plantations use task labour instead, especially in certain rice regions, where a worker might be assigned a specific amount to complete. Historians continue to debate how much limited autonomy task labour allowed in practice, because local conditions varied, and slaveholders often described their own methods in ways that made them sound kinder than they were. Slaveholders were rather gifted at polishing their own reflections. Not all labour happens in fields. Many black Americans in 1840 work in kitchens, laundries, workshops, stables, barns, shipyards, hotels, and city streets. Domestic labour in particular carries its own strain. Cooking begins before much of the household stirs. Fires must be built or revived, water hauled, bread mixed, pots cleaned, floors swept, children dressed, linens washed, clothing mended, furniture dusted, chamber pots emptied, meals planned around the demands of people who may notice every flaw while missing the worker as a person entirely. You move close to wealth, silver, lace, perfume, polished wood, good china, but none of it softens the labour. Sometimes it sharpens the insult. Laundering is especially gruelling. Soap must be made or managed carefully. Water is heavy before it is even heated. Wet cloth is heavier still. Scrubbing, wringing, boiling, rinsing, and hanging take enormous effort. The smell of steam, lye, damp fabric, and smoke can settle into skin and hair. Hands stay raw. Arms ache. Back muscles begin complaining before breakfast and continue their protest well into the evening. Washing large household linens by hand is not gentle work. It is a small war against dirt, one sheet at a time. Enslaved artisans and hired workers occupy another important part of the economy. Blacksmiths, carpenters, coopers, brickmakers, boatmen, seamstresses, and skilled builders create value that can be enormous. In southern towns and cities, some enslaved workers are hired out by their owners to other employers. They may negotiate certain practical details, move through broader spaces, and handle wages that they do not fully control. A skilled artisan might gain a reputation, perhaps even a small measure of leverage, but not genuine security. Skill can increase value in the market without increasing freedom. That is one of slavery's coldest tricks. It turns talent into another reason to hold tighter. For free black Americans, work is also central, though shaped by different barriers. Many free black men and women labour in occupations that are hard, poorly paid, and unstable, even when they possess skill. White employers may limit opportunities, unions may exclude them, and customers may refuse service. Jobs open one day can vanish the next. A free black sailor may travel and earn wages while facing port restrictions and the threat of seizure. A free black barber, caterer, carpenter, or dressmaker may build a reputation among white clients but still remain one dispute away from economic ruin. Respectability helps. It does not erase prejudice. In northern cities, labour often carries a colder style of discrimination. Black workers are pushed into domestic service, carting, hauling, chimney sweeping, dock work, washing, and other physically demanding trades. White competitors sometimes claim that black labour drives wages down, as if racism needed another excuse to dress itself in practical language. The streets are busy, the storefronts bright, the ships tall in harbour, Yet opportunity narrows quickly when colour decides who gets hired first, paid better, or promoted at all. The market likes to call itself impartial. Human beings keep ruining that fiction. Children work too. Enslaved children may begin with lighter duties, then gradually move into more demanding labour as they grow. Water carrying, bird chasing, gathering kindling, minding infants, cleaning yards, and running errands can fill long hours. Free black children may contribute to household income through service, apprenticeship, or street vending. Some attend school when schools exist and when families can manage the loss of labour. Others learn trades by observation and necessity. Childhood does not disappear entirely, but it is forced to share the room with adult burdens much earlier than it should. The workday also teaches timing. There is the sound of the morning horn or bell, the shuffle toward assigned spaces, the brief pause for food, the resumed labour under climbing heat, the angle of sunlight that tells you how much longer the field or workshop will hold you, the late day slowdown of tired bodies. Then the fact, often forgotten in romantic nonsense about the past, that the labour does not necessarily end when official work ends. Clothes need mending. Food must still be prepared, gardens tended, children soothed, tools repaired. Small household needs push onward after the major work is done. Food in the midst of labour is fuel with an attitude problem. Cornmeal, bacon, fatback, molasses, beans, greens, or sweet potatoes might appear, depending on place and circumstance. On some plantations, ration systems leave people chronically underfed, which makes heavy work even more punishing. Gardens, hunting, fishing, gathering, and trading become essential additions when possible. A patch of beans or collards can mean more than flavour. It can mean enough strength to rise again tomorrow. The smell of roasting corn or simmering greens drifting through evening air is not merely pleasant. It is hopeful. Women carry especially layered burdens. Enslaved women may work in fields, houses, dairies, and kitchens and nurseries, often moving between physically exhausting labour and relentless caregiving. They are expected to produce work, maintain composure, and survive violations of body and privacy that white society often refuses to acknowledge honestly. Free black women likewise labour under gendered and racial limitations, finding work as laundresses, domestic servants, cooks, seamstresses, vendors, and caretakers. Their earnings may support entire households. Their labour is often treated as natural, which is a convenient word for people who benefit from it. Pregnancy does not guarantee relief. Illness does not always bring rest. Old age does not necessarily retire a person from usefulness in the eyes of those extracting labour. This is part of what makes the system so consuming. It tries to squeeze value from every stage of life. There are records of enslaved elderly people assigned lighter tasks, but there are also many accounts of older bodies still expected to contribute through spinning, childcare, feeding animals, shelling corn, or other work suited to aching joints. Rest must often be stolen in moments rather than granted with dignity. The emotional texture of labour can be complicated. On one hand, it is coercive, exhausting, and often dangerous. On the other, work can also create skill, pride, and connection within black communities. A woman admired for her bread baking, a man respected for his carpentry, a boatman known for reading river currents, a healer familiar with herbs, a seamstress with fine hands. These are forms of knowledge that matter deeply. People notice competence. They rely on it. They speak of it. Systems of domination want labour without honour. Communities quietly return the honour anyway. There are dangers everywhere within the work itself. Machinery can catch fingers, horses kick, loads shift, heat causes collapse, sharp tools slip, boats overturn, smoke chokes, lye burns, rice swamps carry disease, cotton dust fills the air, tobacco processing can leave skin and lungs irritated. The body pays each trade in a slightly different currency. Yet many owners and employers treat injury less as tragedy than as damaged property or lost productivity. Compassion depends too much on the person in charge. That is never a comforting sentence. A curious detail from the period reveals another layer of this world. Some enslaved people hired out in cities developed reputations so strong that employers specifically requested them by name for certain skilled jobs, almost as if discussing respected contractors. The absurdity is painful. A society might admire a man's craftsmanship while denying his ownership of his own wages, his own movement, even his own children. The contradiction sits there in plain sight, unbothered. Human hypocrisy sleeps very well at night. Religion and labour sometimes intertwine in complicated ways too. White employers may praise faithful service and caste work as a moral duty for the labourer rather than a profit stream for themselves. At the same time, black workers often interpret endurance through spiritual frameworks that help preserve dignity, a song in the field, a hum in the wash house, a whispered prayer before lifting another impossible load. These can steady the mind when the body is pushed beyond fairness. Music in labour does not mean contentment. Often it means survival with rhythm. Work also leaves marks on posture and memory. A person who has spent years carrying water balances differently. A seasoned field hand knows how to save a little motion with each bend. A laundress judges heat by instinct. A cooper hears when a barrel hoop sits wrong. A blacksmith reads colour in metal. These are embodied knowledges, learned without textbooks, tested daily. Historians still dispute how much recognition white records gave to black technical expertise, because many documents focused more on profit than process. The evidence survives in account books, advertisements, memoirs, and the built world itself, though often in fragments. As late afternoon slips toward evening, the senses record everything. The field smells of crushed leaves, hot dust, and sweat. The workshop smells of shavings, tar, iron, or hides. The kitchen carries onion, ash, yeast, and grease. The washyard gives off steam and soap. Muscles tremble slightly after repetitive strain. Shirts cling damply to the back. Shoes rub at the heel. A brief wind feels almost luxurious against the neck. Small pleasures become very precise when labour has emptied the body. And still, within all this, work can become one of the few spaces where whispered knowledge travels. News passes between rows, over tubs, beside ovens, at docks, and along workshop benches. Who was sold, who fell ill, which employer pays late, which road is watched, which preacher said something bold, which family needs help. Labour is meant to isolate people inside function, yet it can also knit them together through shared effort and overheard truth. The people in power rarely appreciate how much listening happens while hands remain busy. So the workday in 1840 is more than toil. It is a full climate of bodily strain, skill, injustice, endurance, and observation. It builds fortunes for others while demanding nearly everything from those doing it. It fills the air with hoe strikes, axle squeals, kitchen clatter, hammer blows, crying children, barking dogs, and tired songs half sung under the breath. It smells of earth, smoke, starch, sweat, leather, and sun-warmed wood. It feels like grit in the palm, heat on the shoulders, and weariness settling deep in the joints. Above all, it reveals how a society can organise itself around black labour while refusing black humanity, which is both the engine of the age and its deepest disgrace. When the labour of the day eases enough for voices to soften, another truth comes forward with painful clarity. Family is precious in 1840 not because life is gentle, but because life is so often cruel. For black Americans, whether enslaved or free, kinship is a shelter built under pressure. It is made from touch, memory, obligation, humour, warning, sacrifice, and love sturdy enough to survive conditions that were plainly designed to break it. A child leaning against a mother's skirt, a father lifting a son onto a fence rail, a grandmother braiding hair by fading light, a sister saving the better portion of supper for a brother who has worked past sunset. These moments carry a tenderness that the wider society rarely respects. That disrespect is not accidental. Systems of control understand that strong family ties make people harder to reduce to tools. If you are enslaved, family life exists inside danger from the beginning. Marriage may be recognized by the couple, their community, and perhaps a minister, but not protected by law in the way white marriage is. A husband and wife may live on different plantations, seeing each other only when permission, distance, and luck allow. Parents may tuck children into sleep at night while knowing that debt, estate division, migration, or whim could separate them without warning. Even the language of ownership poisons ordinary family life. Someone else may claim the power to decide where your child sleeps, where your partner labours, whether an elderly parent remains nearby, or whether a newborn becomes one more entry on a list of property. The domestic slave trade makes this fear constant and justified. By 1840, the expansion of cotton production into the Deep South has already driven large forced migrations of enslaved people from older states such as Virginia and Maryland toward Alabama, Mississippi, Louisiana, Arkansas, and Texas. This movement tears apart families on a massive scale. Traders march people in chained groups overland or ship them by water to markets farther south. The image is grim because the reality is grim. Dusty roads, sore ankles, crying children, iron restraints, and the awful uncertainty of where the journey ends. Someone may be taken because a planter needs cash, someone else because an estate is being settled, another because a trader sees profit in breaking up a household. The market does not care how long two people have loved each other. Sale is the word that hangs over countless family conversations. It can arrive suddenly, announced in a tone that tries to sound practical, almost businesslike, which somehow makes it colder. A mother may hear that one child will remain and another will go. A husband may learn he has been purchased by a man in a different county. A grandparent may be left behind because age lowers market value, while younger relatives are sent away. The emotional violence is immense. White documents often reduce it to numbers, ages, prices, and locations. But inside black communities, the meaning is devastating. Names are repeated so they will not vanish. Faces are memorized. Directions are described again and again. Who lives near which road? Who has a scar above the wrist? Which kin belong to which place? Memory becomes a form of resistance when paper records fail to honor human attachment. Children feel this pressure even when adults try to hide it. They hear grown voices drop in volume. They notice when a mother's hands move restlessly over a dress hem. They see a father staring too long at the road. They learn that strangers arriving on horseback can bring trouble. Childhood in these conditions includes affection, play, teasing, and story, but always with a tremor underneath. A child may cling harder at bedtime. Another may ask whether an older sister will return tomorrow. Sometimes no honest answer exists. Adults become experts at soothing with uncertainty in their own throats, and yet family life is not only fear, it is also routine, and routine matters. Someone wakes the little ones, washes faces, smooths collars, and ties headcloths. Someone teaches how to shell peas quickly, how to keep embers alive, how to avoid offending a dangerous person without surrendering inward pride. Meals, however small, are shared. Stories are passed along, nicknames bloom, jokes survive. A grandmother may tell a tale in a soft evening voice while children lean closer and pretend not to be getting sleepy. A father may carve a toy from a scrap of wood, simple and rough, but wonderful to the small hands receiving it. These gestures build identity. They say you belong to people, not to a ledger. Kinship also extends beyond blood. Enslaved communities often create broad networks of aunties, uncles, play cousins, elders, and protective friends. This is partly practical and partly emotional. When legal structures refuse to safeguard families, communities widen the meaning of family themselves. A woman who loses a child may be helped by neighbours who feed her, sit with her, and keep watch over the other little ones. A young man without living parents may be guided by an older couple who take interest in his choices. Children may move among adults who scold, comfort, teach, and defend them as if linked by formal relation. Such networks are not sentimental decoration. They are architecture. They help people survive shocks that would otherwise leave them entirely exposed. Naming carries deep importance in this world. Parents may choose names that honour relatives, express hope, reflect biblical stories, or preserve ties that slavery tries to erase. Sometimes a child bears two names, one used publicly and one held more intimately within the family. To speak a family name can become an act of continuity. To remember who was called after whom can preserve a whole map of belonging. In communities disrupted by sale and migration, these naming patterns sometimes help reconnect lines of relation. Historians still disagree over how often such connections could be successfully maintained across long distances, because evidence is scattered, and many reunions were remembered orally rather than formally recorded. Oral memory, however, can be stronger than official neglect. Courtship unfolds under pressure too. Young men and women find ways to flirt, laugh, and notice one another despite surveillance, fatigue, and distance. A glance at a gathering, a compliment on a kerchief, a shared joke while carrying water, a chance to speak after worship. Romance does not wait for ideal conditions because ideal conditions rarely appear. Still, relationships must bend around the realities of ownership and labour. A man may need a pass to visit the woman he loves on another plantation. The visit may be brief, closely watched, or denied altogether. Promises are made with sincerity, but no legal guarantee. Love becomes both comfort and risk. Marriage ceremonies among enslaved people can be formal or informal, depending on place and possibility. Some couples join before a minister, others make vows within the community, witnessed by kin and friends rather than the state. There are accounts of couples jumping over a broom, a practice often mentioned in later memory, though scholars debate how widespread it truly was in 1840 across different regions. What matters most is the meaning rather than the exact ritual. Two people claim each other as family in a world determined to keep such claims fragile. The sweetness of the moment is real. So is the shadow surrounding it. For free black Americans, family life is more secure in legal terms but still burdened by racism, unstable work, discriminatory housing, and the threat of kidnapping. A free black family in Philadelphia, New York, Baltimore, Cincinnati, or Boston may rent crowded rooms, save fiercely, educate children when possible, and build ties through churches and mutual aid societies. They may also live with the knowledge that their sons are vulnerable in the street, that daughters face insult in service, and that respectability offers only partial protection. Still, free households often become centres of aspiration. Books are treasured. Proper dress is maintained carefully. Manners are taught with urgency, not because black families are naturally more moral than others, but because the world is constant looking for excuses to deny them full personhood. The home, whether cabin, rented room, alley dwelling, or narrow city house, becomes a place where the public mask may ease for a little while. There is relief in being known without explanation. Someone hands you food before you ask. Someone notices the limp you try to hide. Someone laughs at the face you make when a younger cousin says something outrageous. The room may be cramped, smoky, cold in winter, hot in summer, and full of repairs waiting to be done. Yet it holds something priceless. Familiarity. In a hostile society, familiarity can feel almost luxurious. Women often anchor this domestic world through a tremendous amount of unrecognized labor. Mothers, grandmothers, sisters, wives, and aunts cook, mend, wash, nurse, mediate quarrels, preserve stories, and manage emotions under immense strain. Men also contribute through provision, repair, protection, teaching, and affection, though the conditions of slavery may distort or limit how openly such roles can be exercised. White observers, when they noticed black family life at all, often described it through stereotypes, either denying its depth or sentimentalizing it without understanding its pressure. Reality was far more complex. Black family life in 1840 contained discipline, tenderness, conflict, sacrifice, humour, jealousy, grief, and devotion, which is to say it contained the full range of human domestic experience while being forced to operate under extraordinary threat. Elders hold special authority. A grandmother may know family lines stretching back further than anyone else's. An older man may remember a place from which people were sold years ago and repeat those details so younger kin can carry them onward. Elders teach manners, prayers, remedies, songs, and warnings. They may also watch children while parents labour, turning survival itself into a multi-generational project. Age can bring respect, though not always ease. An elderly person who cannot work as before may fear becoming a burden or being undervalued by owners. Yet within the family, old age often carries the dignity of memory. When records fail, elders become living archives. Loss is everywhere in this domestic world. Children die from illness, mothers die in childbirth, fathers disappear into the trade, siblings are hired out far away. Free relatives in one state may lose contact with enslaved kin in another. Mourning can be open or constrained depending on the demands of labour and the tolerance of white authorities. Some funerals are brief and supervised. Others become moments of profound communal expression through prayer, song, and spoken remembrance. Grief needs ceremony. Communities create it with whatever time and space they can find. A strange little detail from the era reveals how intimate and practical family care could be. Hair work, including braiding patterns and maintenance rituals, carried social meaning as well as usefulness. Hair was tended not only for appearance but for health, dignity, and connection. In the evening, after a punishing day, one person sitting behind another, parting and braiding carefully by lamplight, could create a pocket of calm that no lawmaker ever imagined. Touch has a history too. Quiet, patient, loving touch can be a form of stubborn human repair. Children are taught more than chores. They are taught interpretation, which white people are petty and which are dangerous. How to answer a question without inviting another. When to run errands quickly and when to linger just enough to gather useful news. How to remember names and places. How to show courtesy without losing self-respect. How to pray, perhaps, in ways that carry both faith and coded longing. Some are taught letters in secret by parents, siblings, or other black adults despite legal restrictions. Others learn family stories with such precision that they can recite relations across plantations and counties years later. Knowledge travels through the home even when books are scarce. The emotional burden on parents is immense. To love a child deeply in such a society is to live with continuous fear. Yet parents still dream. They dream that a son may grow strong and careful enough to survive. They dream that a daughter may avoid the worst dangers of service or field labour. They dream of reunion with absent kin. They dream, sometimes, of freedom. Not abstract freedom in a speech, but literal freedom in which a family can remain together without someone else's permission. A modest dream by any decent standard. A revolutionary one in a slave society. By evening, as smoke lifts from cooking fires and voices settle into low conversation, family becomes visible in 1,000 small motions. A child asleep against a shoulder, a shared bowl passed hand to hand, a woman humming while she stitches a torn sleeve, a man rubbing tired feet near the hearth, someone laughing softly at an elder's sharp comment, someone sitting apart for a moment, missing a brother sold away or a mother buried last winter. Homes are made from these scenes as much as from wood and nails. So family in 1840 is not a sentimental backdrop. It is a contested space where love has to work hard. It is a source of comfort and a target of power. It carries the warmth of human attachment and the ache of constant vulnerability. The room may smell of cornbread, smoke, damp wool, and tired bodies. The air may buzz faintly with insects beyond the door. Hands may be rough from labour, voices low from caution, hearts full of both gratitude and dread. Even so, people gather close. They hold on to one another. They keep names alive. They make room for the old, the young, the absent, and the hoped for. In a world determined to control black life, family remains one of the clearest places where that life insists on its own full meaning. As darkness settles more fully and the hard outlines of the day begin to soften, another kind of life becomes easier to feel. It is not freer, exactly. Freedom is still rationed, denied, inspected, and feared. But night can change the texture of things. Voices lower, lamps flicker, the smells of ash, pine smoke, sweat, and cooked greens linger in the air. Crickets begin their steady work. Somewhere, a baby finally stops crying. Somewhere else, someone starts to hum. For black Americans in 1840, faith, song, and shared ritual are not decorative pieces set around life. They are ways of holding life together when so much else is built to tear it apart. Religion in this world is never simple. White ministers, white planters, and white household heads often insist on a version of Christianity that emphasizes obedience, humility, and reward in the next world. They preach submission with remarkable confidence, as though a person can quote scripture and somehow erase the brutality happening outside the church door. It is one of history's more stubborn habits. People in power love to borrow heaven when they are unwilling to behave decently on earth. Still, the same Bible and the same language of faith can be heard very differently in black communities. Under the surface of official sermons, other meanings live and breathe. Black worship in 1840 is shaped by many strands: African cultural memory, evangelical Protestantism, local custom, family teaching, and the practical realities of surveillance all mingle together. In some places, black Americans attend biracial services under white supervision. In others, they gather in separate spaces, formal or informal, where they can pray with more freedom. Free black communities in northern cities often build independent churches that become anchors of education, leadership, mutual aid, and public dignity. In the South, enslaved people may worship in hidden meetings, in quarters, in brush arbours, or in corners of larger gatherings where meaning can move quietly between familiar ears. The sound matters deeply. A spoken prayer can soothe fear. A moan, a chant, a hymn, or a call answered by many voices can create a sense of collective breathing. Music carries what ordinary speech cannot always risk. A line repeated softly gains strength each time it returns. The rhythm settles in the chest, hands clap against palms or knees, feet tap hard earth or worn floorboards. A low voice begins, another joins, then another. The song may rise slowly, not as performance but as shared endurance made audible. You can feel it in the boards, in the air, in your own ribs. Some spirituals and religious songs hold layered meanings. On the surface, they may tell familiar biblical stories about sorrow, deliverance, rivers, crossing over, burden, and home. Beneath that surface, listeners may hear longing for release, movement, reunion, or divine justice that concerns this world as much as the next. Not every song is a coded map, despite modern imagination's fondness for turning every lyric into secret instructions. Historians still argue over how often specific songs carried direct escape meanings in 1840, because evidence is partial and interpretation varies. What is beyond doubt is that the songs carried emotional truth. They helped people name grief, hope, fatigue, and stubborn belief without handing every meaning to hostile ears. Prayer meetings can be tender and intense at once. One person may begin with thanks for surviving another day. Another may pray for sick children, absent husbands, or mothers far away. Someone may ask for protection from a cruel overseer, a violent employer, or the uncertainty of sale. Someone else may speak of Moses, Daniel, or the children of Israel, finding in those stories not only religion but recognition. The room or clearing where this happens may be simple. Rough boards, packed dirt, pine knots burning low, night air moving through leaves, a kettle cooling beside the wall. Yet the emotional space can feel larger than any fine sanctuary. White observers often misunderstood this power. Some dismissed black religion as emotional excess. Others feared it as a seedbed of discontent. Both reactions reveal more about white insecurity than black faith. Worship that restores dignity to the oppressed will always trouble those who profit from humiliation. That is true whether the gathering is loud and ecstatic or quiet and careful. A whispered prayer that says, in effect, you are still a human soul, can be more dangerous to a controlling society than all the shouting in the world. Independent black churches in free communities are especially important by 1840. In cities such as Philadelphia, New York, Boston, and Baltimore, black congregations are not only spiritual homes, they are schools, meeting halls, political centers, and places where leadership can grow. Ministers, deacons, laywomen, teachers, and community organizers all contribute to a world in which black people address one another with seriousness and respect. Church anniversaries, funerals, weddings, and Sunday services offer visible proof that black civic life exists despite constant prejudice. A proper coat, a clean dress, polished shoes, a well-held hymn book. These things become part of a moral and social claim. We are here, we are organized, we are not what you say we are. Women often shape this spiritual world in crucial ways, though formal recognition can vary. They lead prayer circles, teach children, care for the sick, organize charity, prepare meeting spaces, and sustain the emotional fabric of congregational life. Men may hold more visible titles, but women frequently keep the whole structure upright through practical labor and moral force. The same pattern appears in many parts of history, of course. Men stand at the front and clear their throats importantly. Women make sure the thing actually survives. Humanity is nothing if not consistent. For enslaved people, secrecy can be part of worship itself. There are accounts of hidden prayer meetings held in woods or secluded spots, sometimes called hush arbors. Whether every region used the same term or the same practice is uncertain, but the idea is clear enough. Gather where the sound is muffled. Turn a pot or wet cloth to soften voices. Keep watch for patrols. Pray, sing, testify, and weep where white interruption is less likely. The natural world becomes a kind of shelter here. Trees overhead, damp ground beneath, night insects sounding their own little chorus, the smell of leaves and wet earth mixing with breath and candle smoke. It is religion under pressure, sharpened by danger and intimacy. Song also travels beyond formal worship. People sing while working, washing, rocking children, walking roads, and sitting near evening fires. Not every song is sacred, and not every sacred song remains inside a church setting. Tunes drift between labour and devotion, between sorrow and humour. A melody learned from an elder may carry family memory. A refrain repeated by a group may make hard effort feel a shade more bearable. The human voice becomes a portable comfort, one of the few things nobody can fully confiscate. There is also humour in these gatherings, which matters more than many outsiders realise. Faith is not always solemn in the way respectable people imagine. There can be teasing after the service, knowing smiles during a long-winded testimony, warm laughter at the expense of a pompous man who likes hearing himself speak, and soft amusement when a child nods off mid-prayer. Joy is not a betrayal of suffering. Sometimes it is the only sensible answer to it. Oppression expects either silence or despair. Laughter politely declines both options. Biblical stories hold particular force in this context. Exodus speaks loudly, so do deliverance, exile, promised land, captivity, judgment, and the fall of proud kingdoms. These stories do not need modern explanation to feel immediate. A person living under bondage does not have to stretch very far to understand Pharaoh. Yet black faith in 1840 is not only protest by metaphor, it also involves genuine piety, personal conversion, forgiveness, discipline, and the desire to live meaningfully before God. Some historians warn against reading every expression of faith only as political disguise, and they are right to do so. The spiritual life is richer than code alone. It includes mystery, conviction, comfort, and moral struggle that cannot be reduced to strategy. At the same time, faith can create practical consequences. Churches and religious networks help support widows, aid the sick, educate children, bury the dead, and connect travellers to safer households. In free black communities, ministers may help coordinate anti-slavery activity, petitions, or relief efforts. Among enslaved people, religious ties can strengthen trust, and trust is precious in a world built on surveillance. One person known to be steady in prayer may also be trusted with news, family concerns, or practical help, character matters, reputations travel. A curious detail from the era shows how much meaning could sit in small objects. Some black worshippers treasured ribbons, worn books, precious scraps of printed scripture, or personal devotional items with intense care, not because the items were luxurious, but because they represented access to sacred words and a stable inner life. A cracked hymn book or a carefully wrapped Bible could carry enormous emotional weight. To hold such an object after a day of labour was to hold something that answered to the soul rather than the market. Music itself can shape time. A slow, spiritual lengthens a moment until grief has room to breathe. A quicker rhythm lifts tired bodies and draws people together in common pulse. Harmonies, even simple ones, produce a kind of shelter inside sound. One voice alone is moving. Many voices together can feel almost architectural, as though song is building a room around the singers. In places where legal rights are thin and physical safety uncertain, that room matters. It may last only minutes. It still changes people. Children learn through all of this. They hear biblical names long before they grasp every story. They absorb melodies before they can read lyrics. They watch elders close their eyes in prayer, clap in rhythm, bow their heads at meals, and speak softly of God's mercy after days that do not look merciful at all. Religious language becomes one of the first ways many children learn to speak of justice, suffering, and hope. It also teaches listening. When adults choose words carefully, children notice the care itself. There can be tensions too. Some black Americans distrust religion because they have seen it used to excuse cruelty. Others disagree about style, doctrine, discipline, or leadership. Some prefer restrained worship. Others welcome emotional release. Free black congregations in the North may divide over governance, class, abolition strategy, or the role of white allies. Such disagreements are normal. They are signs of living communities rather than evidence of weakness. Real people do not agree all the time, even in the glow of candlelight. What remains striking is how often faith restores a sense of scale. A person who has spent all day being ordered, inspected, or diminished can enter prayer and be reminded that earthly power is not ultimate. That reminder does not abolish danger. It does make danger look less total. There is psychological strength in believing that no planter, employer, patrolman, or lawmaker sits at the center of the universe. Petty tyrants dislike this very much. It spoils their mood. As night deepens, the physical atmosphere of worship and song becomes almost tangible. Pine smoke settles low. Breath catches in the cool air. Fabric brushes against fabric as people lean closer. A baby's sleepy weight rests on an aunt's shoulder. Someone's hand finds another hand in the dark during prayer. Candlelight trembles along a wall or glows between tree trunks if the gathering is outside. Voices rise and fall, then stillness returns for a moment, full and listening. It is in that stillness that many people find the strength to continue. So faith, song, and shared ritual in 1840 are not escapes from reality. They are ways of meeting reality without surrendering the inner self. They give language to pain and shape to hope. They preserve memory, build trust, and create moments of dignity in conditions designed to deny dignity altogether. The melodies may be soft, the prayers quiet, the setting humble, but the force inside them is immense. In a nation determined to measure black life by labour and control, these sacred and musical worlds insist that the soul has its own depth, its own worth, and its own voice, even when spoken in the hush of a dangerous night. Freedom on paper can look reassuring from a distance. A certificate folded neatly into a pocket, a name entered in a register, a tax paid, a rent agreement signed, a church pew occupied by a family that rises and sits with practiced dignity. It can all appear almost settled, almost secure. But for free black Americans in 1840, freedom is rarely allowed to feel ordinary. It is watched, doubted, restricted, and threatened in ways that make daily life tense even when no chains are visible. You may be legally free, yet still live with the knowledge that one missing document, one hostile official, one kidnapper with a quick lie, or one angry crowd could turn liberty into something frighteningly fragile. Free black communities exist across the United States in 1840 in northern cities, border states, southern ports, rural settlements, and scattered neighborhoods near roads, rivers, and marketplaces. Their size, stability, and social position vary widely. In places like Philadelphia, New York, Boston, Baltimore, and Cincinnati, free black residents build churches, schools, benevolent societies, mutual aid groups, businesses, and households that show remarkable endurance and organization. In some southern cities, free black communities also take root, though under especially strict legal supervision. The existence of these communities proves that black life is not defined only by bondage. At the same time, their very presence unsettles white society, which often responds by tightening rules, increasing surveillance, and repeating the old claim that black freedom is somehow dangerous. A classic move. Really. Oppress first, then complain that the oppressed seem unsettling. The first pressure on free black life is documentation. Freedom must often be proved repeatedly. Papers matter everywhere. But for free black Americans, they can become the thin barrier between household order and catastrophic interruption. A free person may carry manumission records, certificates of freedom, sailors' papers, tax receipts, apprenticeship records, letters from employers, or other documents that establish legal status. These papers must be protected from rain, theft, fire, wear, and official indifference. A torn edge can matter, a blurred signature can matter, a clerk's mood can matter. There is something deeply cruel about forcing a person to carry proof of their own legal self at all times in a society eager to question it. Kidnapping is one of the greatest dangers. Free black Americans know that abductors may seize them and claim they are escaped slaves. This threat hangs over ordinary movement like bad weather that never fully clears. Men travelling alone, sailors between ports, women on roads, children sent on errands. All may be at risk in different ways. A free black person may avoid certain routes, travel in company when possible, or stay alert for suspicious wagons and unfamiliar men asking too many questions. Kidnappers exploit the fact that black testimony often carries little weight against white accusation. The speed of the violence is especially terrifying. A person can be free at breakfast and trapped in a trader's system by nightfall if the wrong people act decisively and the law chooses not to care. That fear shapes the body. You walk with purpose, you keep papers close, you memorize names of reliable witnesses and safe households. You know which alley feels too quiet, which constable enjoys throwing his authority around, which wharf attracts rough men who ask where you belong. Children absorb these lessons early. Do not wander. Do not trust every smile. Return before dark. Stay where known people can see you. Freedom requires instruction, because the world around it is arranged to test every seam. Work for free black Americans offers opportunity and humiliation in the same breath. Some men find employment as barbers, carpenters, blacksmiths, labourers, sailors, caterers, coachmen, draymen, and skilled artisans. Some women support households as laundresses, cooks, seamstresses, domestic workers, nurses, teachers, or small traders. In a few places, black entrepreneurs run shops, boarding houses, or service businesses that become important community anchors, yet employment is unstable. Wages can be low, and white competition often turns nasty the moment black success becomes visible. A free black artisan may be praised for his workmanship while denied access to the guild, customer base, or legal protection that would let him prosper fully. A black woman may keep an entire network of families clothed and fed through her labour, while being treated publicly, as though her work is somehow less respectable than that of white women. Societies built on racial hierarchy are wonderfully inventive when it comes to enjoying black labour and resenting black advancement at the same time. Housing reveals the limits of freedom too. In northern cities, free black families often live in crowded districts with poor sanitation, high rents, and limited protection from fire or disease. Landlords may overcharge. White neighbours may protest black settlement. City improvement rarely hurries toward black streets unless disease threatens to spread elsewhere. In southern towns, free black people may own or rent property, but always under heavier legal suspicion. A house can provide shelter and status, but it also makes you visible. Tax records, registration lists, and neighbourhood gossip all work together. Stability is admired by the community and noticed by those who dislike the sight of it. Still, homes are built with care, curtains are mended, floors are scrubbed, Sunday clothes are brushed clean, children are taught table manners, prayer, and restraint. Books, when available, are treasured. Families save for furniture, crockery, schooling, and church dues. This careful cultivation of household order is sometimes described as respectability, but that word can sound too thin for what it means here. It is not mere performance. It is an insistence on humanity under hostile scrutiny. It is a way of saying that your family deserves cleanliness, learning, discipline, aspiration, and peace. Even when the nation around you acts surprised by the idea, education becomes one of the sharpest edges of free black life. Many parents fight fiercely to have children taught. In northern cities, black schools exist in some places, often underfunded and segregated, but valued intensely by families and community leaders. Churches and benevolent societies help fund teachers, books, and rooms where learning can happen. In the South, education for free black people is often more restricted and can be dangerous depending on local law. Reading and writing are not only useful skills, they are tools of defense. A literate person can understand contracts, read notices, keep accounts, write letters, copy names, preserve family memory, and challenge some forms of cheating. That does not make literacy a complete shield, but it makes a difference. Oppressive systems rarely fear ignorance. They fear informed people who can compare what is promised with what is done, Churches stand at the centre of much free black community life. They provide spiritual grounding, charity, leadership training, meeting space, and often educational support. Ministers and lay leaders can become advocates in disputes, organisers of aid, and public voices against injustice. Women frequently sustain the everyday work that keeps these institutions alive through fundraising, visiting the sick, teaching children, preparing gatherings, and supporting the poor. A church building, however modest, offers more than religious ritual. It offers structure. It says that black time, black grief, black joy, and black thought deserve a place in the week that is not defined by white convenience. Mutual aid societies are equally important. Members may contribute small sums to support burials, sickness care, widow relief, or emergency needs. These organisations strengthen community bonds and provide practical help in a world where public support is scarce and private crisis can destroy a household quickly. Burial societies, in particular, matter deeply. To be buried with dignity among people who know your name is no small thing in an era that routinely reduces black lives to labour units or legal problems. Care for the dead reveals much about care for the living, yet freedom does not erase public insult. Free black Americans are often barred from voting, from jury service, from testifying equally in court, from attending white schools, from riding in comfort, from holding certain licenses, or from entering particular trades. Even in states where some black men had once voted, the trend in many places is towards stricter racial exclusion by 1840. Public transportation can be segregated or humiliating. Hotels may refuse service. Theatres may relegate black patrons to marginal spaces or exclude them outright. The message repeats itself endlessly. You are free, but not equal. You may labour, pay, pray, and obey. But you must not forget where white society wishes to place you. It is a mean-spirited arrangement and, frankly, rather obsessed with itself. Free black sailors encounter a special kind of uncertainty. Maritime work offers wages, travel, and information, but ports can be dangerous. Southern authorities often view black sailors with suspicion, fearing that they carry anti-slavery ideas or simply disliking the sight of mobile black men who answer to no local master. Some ports have imposed detention or restrictions on visiting black seamen, making arrival itself risky. The sea promises motion. The dock sometimes answers with confinement, salt air, creaking rigging, tar, wet rope, and gull cries may surround a man whose legal status changes in practice the moment he steps ashore in the wrong city. There are also free black farmers and rural landholders, especially in certain northern areas and border regions. Owning land offers a precious measure of independence. Soil can be worked for one's own household, fences mended for one's own stock, harvest gathered for one's own table. Yet land ownership also attracts white resentment, legal disputes, and pressure from debt or discriminatory enforcement. A black family improving a farm may be admired quietly by neighbours and hated loudly by others. Success can invite attack because it contradicts the racial story many white Americans want desperately to keep telling. A curious detail from the period shows how carefully status could be guarded. Some free black families saved to commission formal portraits, purchase finely bound books, or outfit children in especially careful Sunday clothing, not out of vanity alone, but as deliberate statements of dignity and permanence. To sit for a portrait in a society questioning your place is an act with a bit of steel in it. You're saying, in effect, we belong in memory. We expect to be seen. Class differences also emerge within free black communities. Some households have steadier incomes, stronger church positions, better education, or more secure housing than others. Leaders may debate strategy, manners, political alliance, and the best way to pursue advancement. Some emphasize uplift through education, temperance, and proper conduct. Others stress direct protest, abolitionist cooperation, or the urgent need to expose northern hypocrisy as well as southern slavery. These debates are not signs of weakness. They are signs of a living community thinking about survival, progress, and responsibility in a hostile nation. Historians still argue over how much practical safety-free status provided in different regions, because law and daily practice often diverge sharply. In some places, free black residents created strong institutions and relative neighborhood stability. In others, violence, expulsion threats, and legal discrimination made freedom feel precarious at every turn. The truth is uneven by design. White society never agrees uniformly on what black freedom should look like because many white Americans cannot imagine it without trying to limit it. That uncertainty itself becomes part of the burden. You are free, yes, but constantly reminded that others believe your freedom should come with footnotes. The emotional life inside this condition is complex. There is pride in wages earned, children schooled, businesses built, and marriages sustained. There is relief in not being someone's legal property. There is also weariness in endless proof, caution, and strategic self-presentation. A free black father may stand straighter because no man owns him, while still worrying that his son can be snatched on the road. A free black mother may keep a polished household and educated children, while knowing that public insult can enter the day at any moment. Joy and anxiety live side by side, sharing the same chair. Even leisure must be handled carefully. Visits, church events, lectures, concerts, and neighborhood gatherings can nourish community, but public visibility carries risks. Too much confidence may offend white observers. Too much gathering may arouse suspicion. Too much success may provoke envy. Yet people still gather, celebrate, court, marry, sing, debate, and hope. Human beings continue being gloriously social even when society keeps trying to turn that into a problem. As evening comes on, free black neighborhoods can feel full of movement and intention. Lamps glow behind curtains. A teacher closes her books. A laborer counts coins on a small table. Someone irons a collar for Sunday. Someone copies a letter carefully by candlelight. Children whisper, then laugh, then are hushed. The street outside may smell of mud, horse manure, coal smoke, and damp boards. Inside, there may be stew, soap, starch, and warm bread if fortune has been kind. Nothing here is guaranteed. That may be what makes the order so moving. It has been made against pressure, not in the absence of it. So free black life in 1840 is not a simple contrast to slavery, as if one world were dark and the other comfortably lit. It's better to imagine a narrow strip of ground bordered by cliffs. On that ground, people build institutions, homes, friendships, ambitions, and reputations with extraordinary care. They claim as much ordinary life as the age will allow. They protect papers, children, wages, and names. They pray, organize, study, and work. They endure insult without accepting it as truth. Freedom is real here. So is danger. The remarkable thing is not that fear remains, but that so many people manage to create dignity, community, and purpose while carrying it. The farther you move from plantation fields, the easier it becomes for a comforting national myth to appear. It says slavery belongs to the South, prejudice belongs to rough men with whips, and the North stands clean by comparison. It is a very convenient story, polished nicely for public display. It is also deeply misleading. For black Americans in 1840, Northern life can offer wages, churches, schools, newspapers, and a legal condition different from slavery, but it does not offer escape from racial control. The methods change, the tone changes, the grip remains. In some ways, it feels colder because it arrives wearing the costume of fairness. Northern cities are growing fast by 1840. Streets are busy with carts, ships, markets, workshops, boarding houses, and construction. Smoke hangs above rooftops. Mud gathers in ruts after rain. Horses stamp and snort outside taverns and warehouses. Bells ring from churches and public buildings. It is a world of movement, noise, and commerce, and black Americans are part of it in every practical sense. They load cargo, cook meals, clean homes, cut hair, sew clothes, sweep streets, build structures, print papers, preach sermons, and raise families. Their labour is visible everywhere. Their rights are not. In cities like Philadelphia, New York, Boston, and Cincinnati, black communities create institutions of remarkable strength. Churches anchor neighbourhoods. Mutual aid societies support widows, the sick, and the poor. Schools teach children with limited resources but serious purpose. Black newspapers and speakers help shape public opinion and political debate. There is energy here, even aspiration. Yet that growth happens under relentless pressure from segregation, job exclusion, public insult, and periodic white violence. A northern street can look freer than a southern plantation. It can also remind you, block by block, that freedom without equality is a narrow and fragile arrangement. Work is one of the clearest examples. Many northern employers are perfectly willing to benefit from black labour while refusing black advancement. Black men may find jobs as dock workers, porters, coachmen, chimney sweeps, waiters, barbers, and general labourers. Black women often work as laundresses, cooks, domestic servants, seamstresses, and caregivers. These occupations require stamina, skill, and discipline, yet they are frequently underpaid and insecure. White workers and employers alike may argue that black workers are suited only for certain tasks, which is a polite way of saying that racial hierarchy is being defended as common sense. Few things are more irritating than prejudice pretending to be practical wisdom. Skilled trades are especially contested. A black carpenter, printer, or mechanic may possess real ability and a strong reputation, yet still face exclusion from training networks, guild-like associations, or stable contracts. White journeymen and apprentices may resent competition and push for removal or restriction. Employers may praise craftsmanship while avoiding equal wages. This creates a strange pattern in which black excellence is acknowledged just enough to be useful, but not enough to be rewarded fairly. The market advertises itself as blind. It keeps peaking. Housing tells a similar story. Free black families in northern cities often cluster in particular streets or districts, partly for mutual support and partly because white landlords and neighbours restrict where they may live. The homes may be narrow, crowded, and vulnerable to fire or disease. Water access can be poor. Waste removal may be irregular. Streets may flood or turn foul after heavy weather. Yet within these neighbourhoods there is order, effort, and social texture. Windows are curtained, stoops are swept, children are watched closely. Neighbours exchange news, caution, and practical help. Hard conditions do not erase care. In many cases they sharpen it. Public transportation can become a daily theatre of humiliation. Black passengers may be forced into inferior seating, made to wait, or refused entirely on ferries, stage lines, rail cars, and omnibuses. Even when a fare is paid properly, dignity is not included in the ticket. A person going to work, visiting family, or attending church may have to weigh the insult of mistreatment against the necessity of reaching the destination at all. Travel becomes another lesson in measured endurance. You stand still, speak carefully, and hope not to become the day's target for a conductor in a foul mood and a crowd eager to enjoy the spectacle. Schools provide opportunity, but rarely on equal terms. In some northern places, black children attend separate schools that are poorly funded, overcrowded, or dependent on constant community fundraising. Teachers may be deeply committed, but books are scarce and buildings inadequate. White reformers sometimes praise the idea of education while opposing actual integration, as though knowledge should be distributed by colour like bolts of fabric. Black parents know better They fight for schooling because literacy, arithmetic, and discipline are defences against exploitation and erasure. A child who can read notices, keep accounts, and write letters carries tools that matter far beyond the classroom. Churches remain central in northern black life, not only as places of worship but as political and social institutions. Inside these spaces, people organise lectures, aid societies, Sunday schools, debates, and campaigns against discrimination. Ministers and lay leaders speak with authority developed through study, experience, and public responsibility. Women sustain much of the daily work through teaching, fundraising, visitation, and practical management. The church building itself, however modest, can feel like a counterweight to the outside world. Within its walls, black voices are not secondary by design. That alone changes posture. It changes breath. Northern racism often prides itself on being less brutal because it is less openly owned. There are fewer legal claims of property and persons. There are more speeches about improvement, order, and citizenship. Yet exclusion can be systematic without being theatrical. A black man may be told politely that no position is available while watching a less qualified white applicant hired in his place. A black family may be priced out, warned away, or harassed until a desired neighbourhood remains unofficially closed. A black child may be offered education, but only in a separate room with inferior supplies. This is control in gloves rather than chains. The hand still closes. White mobs make the danger impossible to ignore. Northern cities and towns periodically erupt in anti-black violence, often fueled by labour tension, abolitionist activity, neighbourhood change, or plain racial hatred looking for an excuse. Homes, churches, schools, and meeting halls can be attacked. Streets that seemed merely hostile by day can become terrifying by night if crowds gather with bricks, clubs, and a taste for destruction. The sound of such violence travels fast, shouting, glass breaking, feet running, women calling for children, men bracing doors, smoke rising where it should not. Public order, so proudly celebrated in civic language, can vanish quickly when white rage decides it has permission. Abolitionism complicates northern life further. Many black Americans work closely with anti-slavery allies, speak at meetings, circulate petitions, and build networks that challenge slavery directly. Yet even some white abolitionists carry paternal assumptions, offering support without full equality. The relationship can be productive and uncomfortable at once. Black speakers and writers often have to insist, sometimes repeatedly, that they are not symbols to be displayed but leaders in their own right. It is an old problem. People love justice in theory until justice starts speaking for itself. Black newspapers and printed literature play a growing role in this world. Editors, writers, lecturers, and activists use print to argue against slavery, defend black citizenship, report abuses, promote education, and connect scattered communities. Reading rooms, church halls, and parlours become places where ideas circulate beside teacups, candle stubs, and worn chairs. Print culture matters because it counters the national habit of speaking about black people without listening to them. A newspaper can cross distance faster than a wagon, and an argument in print can travel into homes where its author would not be welcomed at the door. Women in northern black communities carry extraordinary responsibilities. They labour for wages, maintain households, raise children, support churches, organise charitable work, and often assist with educational or abolitionist efforts. Their contributions are sometimes less publicly celebrated than those of male speakers or ministers, but community life would unravel quickly without them. A woman who washes clothes all day may still spend her evening helping prepare a church fundraiser or caring for a sick neighbour's child. The stamina involved is astonishing. Society notices mainly when it wants service. Children grow up learning two realities at once. They are taught dignity, discipline, and aspiration within home and church, while the wider world teaches suspicion. A black child may memorize scripture, practice penmanship, and dress neatly for Sunday, then be mocked in the street on Monday. Such contradictions form character under strain. Parents and teachers work to prevent bitterness from hardening into despair, which is no small task. They must explain injustice without allowing it to define the child's entire imagination, a delicate assignment, even on the best days. A curious detail from the period reveals how fiercely communities valued self-improvement. Literary societies and debating clubs formed in some northern black communities, bringing together men and women to practice speech, discuss politics, and sharpen thought. Imagine the scene. Candles burning low, papers rustling, our coats damp from outside weather. Someone rising to make a serious argument while another waits to reply. It is wonderfully human. Also slightly intimidating if you forgot your notes. These societies mattered because they cultivated public confidence in a world devoted to denying black intellectual authority. Legal inequality remains a constant obstacle. Voting rights for black men vary by state and are often being narrowed rather than expanded. Court access is limited, jury services restricted. Property rights may exist formally while social enforcement undermines them. In some places, black residents must register or face special regulations not imposed on whites. Historians still disagree over whether Northern gradual emancipation and civic reform meaningfully softened racial exclusion by 1840, because outcomes differed across states and cities. What does seem clear is that legal freedom never translated automatically into social acceptance. The gap between principle and practice remained wide enough to walk a whole hypocrisy parade through it. There is also emotional exhaustion in being told, constantly, to prove worthiness, be respectable, be industrious, be sober, be educated, be patient, be grateful, be above reproach. The demands pile up as though humanity were an exam that black Americans alone must pass every morning. White citizens, meanwhile, often manage to remain quite flawed without anyone suggesting they have thereby disqualified their entire race from rights. Remarkable arrangement. Very efficient for preserving inequality. Still, northern black communities are not defined only by grievance. They contain pleasure, ambition, style, friendship, and beauty. Music drifts from open windows. Children play in alleys and yards when they can. Tailors cut fine clothes. Barbers shape careful appearances. Teachers praise a student's neat hand. Preachers thunder and soothe in turn. Lovers walk together after service. Families save for books, furniture, and better schooling. People laugh at one another's hats, celebrate weddings, mourn the dead properly, and dream of futures larger than the city limits. None of this cancels oppression. It proves life continues in full colour despite it. By late evening, northern streets change character. Shop shutters close. Lamps flicker in upper windows. Cartwheels rattle less often. Coal smoke settles into the damp air. Somewhere down the block, a woman calls a child inside. Somewhere else, a church meeting breaks up in low conversation. Boots strike pavement, then fade. A newsboy's last cry dissolves into distance. Behind one thin wall, a family kneels for prayer. Behind another, a young man copies lines from a borrowed book. The city does not sleep kindly for everyone. But within its narrow rooms, black Americans continue building minds, households, and institutions under conditions that are difficult, unfair, and unmistakably alive. So the northern world of 1840 offers no simple refuge from racial control. It replaces plantation commands with ordinances, customs, exclusions, economic ceilings, and the quiet menace of crowd hatred. It allows motion, but not comfort. It allows labour, but not fairness. It allows institutions, but often not equal recognition. And still, black Americans claim space within it. They teach, preach, publish, save, debate, dress well, worship deeply, and create community in streets that rarely welcome them fully. The chains may be absent from sight, yet the pressure remains real. So does the determination to live beyond it. By now you can feel how much of life in 1840 depends on being watched, and on learning to watch in return. For Black Americans, this is not a special condition reserved for moments of crisis. It is ordinary. It follows you into roads, kitchens, workshops, churches, docks, yards, and doorways. Eyes are everywhere, though not all eyes carry the same danger. Some belong to masters, mistresses, overseers, employers, patrol riders, clerks, constables, landlords, ferrymen, sister, and neighbours who believe surveillance is their right. Others belong to children peeking from porches, women at windows, men leaning on fence rails, and strangers who think a black person must always be explained. To live under constant control is to live under interpretation. Your face, tone, speed, clothing, companions, silence. And even your calm can be treated as clues in a case that no one ever stops building against you. This makes caution a daily skill, not an abstract virtue, a bodily practice. You learn how to step into a room without seeming too bold. You learn how long to pause before answering. You learn that some white people dislike direct eye contact, while others take lowered eyes as proof of guilt or insolence. There is no perfect response because the system is not designed to be satisfied. Still, people study it carefully. Survival often depends on reading the small weather of power, a tightened mouth, a careless laugh, a slow turn of the head, a hand resting too easily near a stick or pistol. Much of the danger announces itself in miniature before it becomes loud. For enslaved people, the overseer is one of the clearest faces of this pressure. On large plantations, the overseer monitors labour pace, discipline, movement, and output. He counts, compares, threatens, and reports. The sound of his horse can change the feel of an entire field. Conversation lowers. Hands move faster. Backs straighten or bend more quickly. The work itself has already been punishing, but observation adds another layer. It insists that effort must be seen, legible, and measurable to authority. An overseer may not know much about the crop beyond how to demand more of it, yet he often wields enormous influence over the shape of the day. Ignorance in command is always a tedious thing. In households, mistresses and masters exercise a different kind of watching. Domestic workers are observed for speed, obedience, tidiness, expression, and trustworthiness. A floor can be declared poorly swept, a dish insufficiently polished, a child's collar tied wrong, a voice too flat, a movement too slow. Domestic labour happens close to the moods of those in power, which means the standards often shift with appetite, vanity, jealousy, or boredom. A woman carrying water through a hall may feel watched not only for her work, but for how quietly she occupies space. A man in a stable or carriage house may be measured by whether he appears grateful enough, while doing whatever unpleasant task has just been handed to him. The burden is not just labour, it is performance. Employers of free black workers can be nearly as intrusive in their own way. A white employer may decide that a black labourer must be more deferential than a white one, more punctual, more patient, more willing to absorb insult. A free black woman in service may find that her speech, clothing, visitors, and private reputation are all treated as matters for employer judgment. Renting a room from a white landlord can bring another set of eyes. Late return, too many guests, too much noise, too much confidence. The complaint may come wrapped in politeness, but the message remains plain. Your life is considered open to inspection, even outside workplaces and households. White neighbours often appoint themselves guardians of racial order. A person standing at a gate too long may draw questions. A gathering of black men in conversation may attract suspicion. Children playing loudly can be described as disorderly. when white children doing the same are called lively. Free black success in dress, education, or property ownership may bring admiration from some quarters and resentment from others. This kind of neighbourhood watching is powerful because it turns ordinary social life into a network of informal policing. You do not need a badge when a whole street thinks scrutiny is civic duty. Black Americans respond by becoming extraordinary readers of character, who is lazy enough to ignore minor things, who is petty enough to punish them, who enjoys humiliation, who can be negotiated with, who should never be trusted alone. Such judgments are made quickly and revised constantly. A person may appear mild in public and cruel in private. Another may act rude but prove reliable in a pinch. Some white women quietly pass information or overlook small acts of independence. Others use softness as a disguise for control. Some poor white labourers feel solidarity in work one moment and racial superiority the next. Human beings are inconsistent, which is partly why oppressive systems are so exhausting. You must keep updating your map. Speech becomes one of the most carefully managed parts of daily life. There are tones for public safety and tones for trusted company. There are words that can be spoken openly and words that must travel in half phrases, glances, or changed subjects. A black person may answer respectfully while meaning something more complicated inwardly. He may laugh at a white man's joke because not laughing carries risk. She may praise an instruction she privately despises because survival does not always permit honesty. This is not simple submission. It is code switching under pressure long before the modern phrase exists. The split between outer expression and inner judgment can grow very wide. Posture matters too. You stand in certain ways before authority, hands visible, movements measured, voice even, not too eager, not too slow, not too familiar, not too cold. It is a maddening choreography, and many white observers mistake the skill it requires for natural deference. In truth, it is often disciplined acting. Whole communities become experts in the management of appearance, because appearance can interrupt violence or invite it. Historians sometimes describe this as accommodation, dissimulation, or strategic behaviour. Those words are useful, but they do not fully capture the fatigue of doing it every day. Imagine performing a role for your safety before breakfast and again before bed, with no curtain call and no real audience sympathy. Children learn these codes young. They watch adults answer questions with care. They notice which names are spoken warmly and which with caution. They are corrected for tone, not because their elders enjoy severity, but because the world punishes black children early for behaviours overlooked in white ones. A child may be taught how to greet, how to stand still, how to carry a message exactly, and how not to look frightened when frightened. Such lessons can sound hard. They are also acts of love. To prepare a child for a dangerous world is a painful form of protection. Women face especially complex surveillance. Their bodies, speech, domestic work, sexual reputations, and family roles are all subject to judgment from white authority and, at times, from black communities trying to preserve respectability under pressure. An enslaved woman in a house may be watched while cooking, cleaning, nursing children, serving guests, and moving through intimate spaces that never belong to her. A free black woman in a northern city may be judged by employers, landlords, church members, and passers-by who read her clothing and conduct as evidence for broad racial claims. To be seen constantly and understood poorly is a special kind of weariness. Men also carry particular pressures. Black men are frequently watched for signs of independence, anger, sexuality, leadership, or resistance. A confident walk can be read as insolence. A private conversation can be labelled conspiracy. Physical strength, which makes a man valuable as labour, can also make him frightening to white observers eager to imagine threat. This means many black men must balance dignity with careful self-reduction in public spaces, a humiliating demand that presses inward over time. A person should not have to shrink himself to move safely through daylight, yet many do. There are places where this watching becomes almost theatrical: courthouse yards, ferry landings, market squares, church doors after service, docks at unloading time, roads at dusk. In these spaces, people look at one another while knowing they are being looked at. A constable pretends to be casual. A merchant pretends not to stare. A mistress pretends her authority is merely domestic concern. A patrol rider pretends suspicion is public duty. Everyone performs, though some performances carry far more power than others. The stage is everyday life, and the script is racial hierarchy repeated until it tries to sound natural. A curious detail from the period captures this atmosphere perfectly. In some towns, white residents grew highly attentive to who carried parcels, letters, or packages, and for whom, because black mobility linked to information could seem unsettling. The sight of a black messenger or literate worker moving confidently through public space could trigger outsized suspicion. A folded paper in the hand became more alarming than a barrel rolling loose in the street. Control is often most nervous when it senses intelligence at work, because surveillance is so constant. Privacy becomes precious. A cabin after dark, a corner of a yard, a quiet walk to the pump, a minute in a loft, a conversation while shelling peas or hanging wash. These moments allow the face to relax, the shoulders to drop, the real opinion to return. People vent, joke, plan, grieve, and correct one another when white ears are absent. The emotional relief is not trivial. It is the difference between being observed and being known. One hardens you, the other steadies you. Black communities also watch one another, though in a very different spirit. They look out for danger, notice changes in mood, track suspicious strangers, and pay attention to who needs help. A woman may see that her neighbour's child is ill before the mother says a word. A man may recognise from another's face that something went wrong with an employer or overseer. Children are counted in and out of doors. Visitors are assessed quickly. This is communal vigilance rather than domination. It arises from care, though care itself can sometimes become strict under pressure. Communities living under threat do not always have the luxury of casual indifference. Scholars still debate how much room constant surveillance left for hidden autonomy in different settings, because evidence comes unevenly through slave narratives, court records, plantation journals, letters, and memoirs. Some accounts emphasize total domination, others reveal many small gaps in control. The likely truth is that surveillance was heavy but never complete. White authorities wanted omniscience. They settled for intimidation, routine, and confidence. They were often less all-knowing than they imagined. That gap mattered. It is where much of black daily strategy lived. The strain of all this settles in the nervous system. You may find yourself listening for footsteps before sleeping, flinching at sudden voices, preparing explanations before any question is asked, smiling without warmth, measuring each room for exits and hazards. It is a long education in anticipation, yet it also sharpens perception in remarkable ways. Many black Americans become acute observers of human behaviour, timing, and environment because they must. They hear what others miss. They see intention in a pause, danger in a laugh, opportunity in a careless habit. Oppression tries to dull the spirit. Instead, it often produces terrifyingly good readers of reality. As night returns and the public gaze thins slightly, the body begins to loosen, not fully, never fully, but enough to feel the difference. The porch boards creak under familiar feet. Someone exhales deeply after holding the day in check. A lamp burns low. Crickets carry on with their tiny, unstoppable business. Somewhere a pot lid settles with a soft click. Somewhere else 2 people speak plainly at last. That plainness is a luxury. To say what you mean without arranging your face first is no small comfort. So this world of watchers and watched is one of the clearest ways control works in 1840. It is not only law and labour, it is scrutiny. It is being made into an object of interpretation by those who assume the right to judge your movement and mood. It is also the hard-won skill of judging them in return. reading the watchers closely enough to survive them. The cost is high. The intelligence it produces is extraordinary. Beneath every glance, every pause, every carefully chosen word, you can feel the same human truth. No one likes living under inspection, but many learn, with remarkable discipline, how to endure it without letting it swallow the self whole. Even in a world built to control nearly every movement, resistance never disappears. It changes shape. It grows quiet when it must, practical when it can, and bold when the risk becomes worth taking. For Black Americans in 1840, resistance is not always a dramatic dash through moonlit woods, though sometimes it is exactly that. More often, it lives in smaller acts that outsiders fail to notice or choose not to understand. A lesson whispered over a scrap of paper. A warning passed across a yard. A day's work slowed just enough to reclaim a sliver of strength. A child protected from a cruel eye. A memory preserved. A route remembered. A lie told to power for a good reason. Resistance can look ordinary because ordinary life is where control does most of its work. The simplest form of resistance may be the refusal to let the mind become what the system demands. Enslavement tries not only to command labour, but to shape identity. It insists that some people are naturally fitted to rule and others to obey. It repeats this through law, religion, custom, punishment, and daily humiliation until the lie begins to sound familiar. But familiarity is not the same as truth. Black Americans resist by maintaining inward judgments that reject the whole arrangement. They know who is cruel, who is foolish, who is pretending, who is weak, and who deserves no moral respect at all. Such thoughts may remain unspoken in public, yet they matter. A private refusal to believe in the legitimacy of domination is often the first room in which all other resistance begins. Work itself becomes one of the main battlegrounds. Under slavery, labour is extracted through force, measurement, and threat. But the labourer still controls certain details of pace, technique, and effort, slowing the rhythm, feigning confusion, breaking a tool accidentally on purpose, stretching a task, hiding fatigue behind obedient motions. All can become ways of reducing what the master or overseer takes. These acts are dangerous, because discovery may bring punishment, yet they persist because people are not machines. They think about how to preserve their own bodies and one another's limited energy. White planters often complain in letters and journals about laziness, carelessness, or poor discipline, seldom pausing to consider that no one naturally rushes to enrich a person who claims ownership over them. A mystery for the ages. Apparently, resistance also appears in theft, though the word itself becomes slippery in this setting. If an enslaved person takes food, cloth, tools, or time from someone who has already stolen labour, kin, and freedom, the moral arithmetic looks rather different from the planter's account book. Corn from a crib, meat from a smokehouse, thread from a workroom, or an hour of unsupervised rest may all become part of survival strategy. Such acts can support whole households, especially where rations are poor and labour demands relentless. Some owners rage over missing goods as though the order of civilization has been shaken. Civilization, meanwhile, remains strangely silent about the original theft upon which the entire plantation rests. Learning in secret is another powerful form of defiance. In many places, black literacy is feared precisely because it opens doors to information, communication, scripture, bookkeeping, and wider worlds of thought. When a child is taught letters by an older sibling, a free neighbour, a preacher, or a daring white acquaintance, something significant happens. The line of control is crossed. The alphabet becomes more than a schoolroom tool. It becomes access. An enslaved man who can read a pass, a newspaper headline, or a place name has gained something the system wanted hidden. An enslaved woman who can write a name or copy a phrase can carry memory differently. Even partial literacy matters. A few letters can become a map. A whole sentence can become a weapon. News travels through black communities with remarkable skill. Messages move by conversation at wells, workshops, church doors, ferries, kitchens, docks, and roadside exchanges. People pass along information about sales, patrols, epidemics, prices, harsh overseers, abolition meetings, safe households, and planned movement. Rumour can be dangerous, of course, but in a world where official information is controlled by hostile people, rumour also becomes one of the only ways to build a picture of events beyond the immediate horizon. A man hired out to town may carry news back to a plantation. A woman in domestic service may overhear travel plans or financial trouble that affects several families. A sailor may bring stories from distant ports. Information does not guarantee freedom, but ignorance almost always strengthens control. Family protection is a major site of resistance too. Parents shield children where they can, delaying hard truths until they must be spoken, teaching survival codes, hiding emotional wounds, and trying to keep little ones from attracting dangerous attention. Older siblings watch younger ones closely. Kin scrape together food, clothing, and care for the sick. People stand in for absent relatives and keep names alive for those separated by sail or distance. This is resistance because domination depends on breaking continuity. To preserve a child's sense of belonging, to remember where an aunt was sold, to repeat a grandparent's story accurately, to carry a family name across counties, all of this pushes back against the system's desire to make people disposable. Religion can hold resistant meaning even when it appears outwardly gentle. Prayer meetings strengthen courage. Spiritual language reminds people that earthly power is not final. Stories of deliverance encourage moral comparison between the oppressor's claims and divine justice. A song about crossing over may comfort grief, stir longing, and quietly affirm that bondage is not the final condition of the world. Not every act of worship is political in a narrow sense. Yet faith often nourishes the emotional stamina required for resistance of every kind. People need reasons to continue. They need images larger than the plantation gate, the employer's ledger, or the daily insult. Sacred imagination provides that. Free black communities resist through institution building, schools, churches, mutual aid societies, literary groups, newspapers, and business networks all challenge the notion that black life should remain dependent, voiceless, or socially scattered. A teacher opening a school with poor supplies and determined discipline is resisting. A minister helping organize relief for widows is resisting. A newspaper editor printing arguments against slavery and discrimination is resisting. A seamstress saving money to educate a child is resisting. These actions do not always look like protest because they are also acts of creation. They build a world inside the hostile one and insist that black futures are worth planning for. There are more direct forms of organised opposition too. By 1840, black abolitionists, lecturers, ministers, and writers are active in many northern cities and some border regions. They attend conventions, publish essays, petition legislatures, support fugitives, and challenge colonization schemes that propose sending free black Americans elsewhere, rather than granting equality at home. Their work is not merely symbolic, it shapes public debate, strengthens networks, and refuses the lie that black people are passive subjects of history. White allies may assist, but black leadership remains essential. No one understands the urgency better than those carrying it in their own bodies. Escape, of course, remains one of the most dramatic forms of resistance. For enslaved people, running away can mean slipping off for a night to visit family, fleeing for several days to avoid punishment, hiding in nearby woods, or attempting a permanent journey toward freedom. Each type carries different motives and risks. Temporary absence may reclaim personal ties or emotional breath. Permanent escape demands planning, nerve, local knowledge, and extraordinary luck. Dogs, patrols, rivers, weather, hunger, distance, and betrayal all threaten the attempt. Yet people keep trying. That fact alone says something profound. Even when the odds are terrible, the desire for freedom refuses to sit politely where power places it. The practical side of escape depends on many small skills: knowing which roads are watched, knowing where water can be found, knowing who among the free black population might offer help, knowing how to travel at night, hide by day, and avoid leaving signs. Some fugitives disguise themselves through clothing, forged papers, altered speech, or confident posture. Others rely on swamps, woods, boats, wagons, or the complexity of towns. Historians continue to debate how formal or widespread organised escape networks were in different regions by 1840, because later memory sometimes smooths rough realities into tidy legend. What remains certain is that help often came through scattered individuals and communities willing to take serious risks. A hidden meal, a stable corner, a borrowed coat, a warning at the right moment. These could make the difference between capture and movement. Women resist in ways that historical records have not always honoured fully. They protect children, conceal information, negotiate with mistresses, preserve food, teach skills, maintain kinship, and sometimes plan or support escapes. An enslaved woman in a household may hear things no one expects her to understand and use that knowledge carefully. A free black woman running a boarding house or laundry may quietly connect people, shelter travellers, or spread news. Resistance is often imagined in masculine terms because public drama tends to favour men with speeches or visible escapes. Much of the real sustaining work, however, depends on women managing danger with intelligence so steady it almost disappears into the background. Children and young people resist too, though usually in smaller and more fragile ways. They may learn forbidden letters, carry messages, mimic adults to gather information, hide treasured objects, or test the boundaries of imposed obedience. A child's resistance can be as simple as preserving curiosity in a system that prefers fear. It can be stubborn memory, secret play, or loyalty to family stories. Adults notice this and nurture it carefully. Too much open defiance can be crushed. Too little spirit can be crushed just as surely. The challenge is to keep the flame without letting the wind see it too clearly. A curious detail from the era shows how resistance could hide inside everyday craft. Some enslaved and free black people used sewing, quilting, hairdressing, woodworking, or basket making not only as labour, but as spaces for conversation, planning, and preserving communal knowledge. Hands staying busy made talk seem harmless. Needles move, cloth folds, fingers braid, and meanwhile information passes. White observers often underestimated such settings because they mistook domestic or artisanal work for simple routine. Underestimation has its uses. Resistance also includes the defense of dignity and personal style and behaviour. Clean clothing, careful speech among trusted people, pride in skilled work, proper mourning for the dead, and insistence on respectful marriage or child rearing all contradict racist claims that black life lacks order or moral seriousness. Some of these actions may look conservative rather than rebellious, but in a society invested in degrading black humanity, orderly self-possession can itself be defiant. To remain mentally and morally organised under constant disrespect is not passivity. It is a form of endurance sharpened into principle. There are limits, of course. Not every plan succeeds. Not every whispered lesson remains hidden. Not every flight reaches safety. Punishment can be terrible. Betrayal happens. Hunger, exhaustion, weather, and fear ruin many brave attempts. Some people choose caution over risk because they have children to protect, elderly parents to care for, or no trustworthy path ahead. This does not make them less resistant. Historians sometimes divide people too neatly into rebels and sufferers, as though survival itself were not an active labour. In truth, resistance exists on a wide spectrum, from the inward refusal to believe a lie to the outward decision to flee everything familiar in pursuit of freedom. What binds these acts together is intention. A person slows the work because the body must be preserved. A woman teaches a child letters because the future must be widened. A family shares hidden food because hunger must not win. A preacher chooses a biblical text of deliverance because memory must stay alive. A free black editor publishes a sharp argument because silence would serve the oppressor too well. A man studies the stars because he may soon need them. These choices, taken one by one, form a landscape of resistance that runs beneath the official history like water under stone. As night deepens, you can almost sense that hidden landscape around you. A low conversation behind a cabin wall, soft footsteps where no footsteps should be, a folded scrap tucked into clothing, a prayer that means more than it says, the smell of pine boards, lamp smoke and cool earth, the hush before someone decides whether to stay or run. Resistance often sounds quiet at first. That is because quiet is how many dangerous truths begin. So by 1840, black resistance is everywhere, though not always in forms the powerful recognize. It appears in mind, memory, family, skill, institution, movement, and faith. It steals time back from labour. It carries names across distance. It teaches children what must not be forgotten. It builds schools and churches under insult. It prints arguments. It hides fugitives. It survives disappointment. Above all, it reveals that constant control is never complete. A system can command the road, the field, the workshop, and the courtroom, yet still fail to extinguish the steady human insistence on freedom, connection, and self-worth. That insistence is not loud in every moment. It does not need to be. It only needs to endure. Night has a different weight when you have spent the whole day managing danger. By 1840 for black Americans, darkness can bring a little relief from open supervision, but it also invites new worries to sit closer. The body is tired enough to sleep. The mind is not always willing. Too much has happened in daylight. Too much may happen tomorrow. So the last hours before rest often become a quiet reckoning, a time when fear, memory, faith, longing, and stubborn hope gather in the same small space. A lamp burns low, the air cools slightly, smoke from the hearth lingers in the rafters. Outside, insects grind out their tiny music, and somewhere in the distance a dog answers another dog across the dark. Inside, people think thoughts they cannot always afford to speak while the sun is up. The first thoughts are often practical. Is there enough meal for tomorrow? Will the child with the cough improve by morning? Did the pass get folded and hidden safely? Will rain spoil the road? Did the trader mean to return? Did the mistress notice the missing cloth? Can the rent be managed next week? Has the sailor come back to port? Is that pain in the shoulder just strain, or something worse? Black life in 1840 demands this constant inventory of risk. It is not dramatic in the grand public sense. It is intimate. It sits by the bedroll, beside the pallet, near the small table, inside the tired head. Yet once the practical worries settle into place, deeper thoughts begin to move behind them. Memory becomes one of the strongest presences at night. In quiet hours, absent people return vividly. A mother sold years ago, a child buried too young, a husband on another plantation, a sister living free in a distant city, a father lost somewhere on the river or the road. The day's work may leave little room for mourning, but night opens a narrower and more private chamber for it. Faces appear in the mind with remarkable detail. The line of a cheek, the shape of a hand, a laugh half remembered, the tone of a voice saying your childhood name. In this way, darkness becomes both comfort and ache. It allows memory to breathe, though memory does not always come gently. For many, there is also the memory of places. A creek crossed long ago, a yard swept every morning in another county, a tobacco barn from childhood, a Baltimore alley alive with voices at dusk, a northern church with a particular creak in the pews, a patch of garden behind a small rented house, a road lined with pines where someone once walked beside you and spoke of freedom as if it were a destination that could be reached by feet alone. Place matters because it holds relation. To remember a place is often to remember who stood there with you, who left it, and who never returned. Night thoughts can also turn toward the future in ways daylight cannot manage. During the day, survival often fills every available space. At night, possibility returns, though it may come carefully. Some imagine reunion with separated kin. Some imagine earning enough to purchase a loved one, though the sums involved can be crushing and the outcome uncertain. Some imagine escape. Some imagine a child educated beyond the parent's own circumstances. Some imagine a church built stronger, a shop opened, a newspaper printed, a little plot of land fenced and worked for one's own household. These dreams vary by legal status, place, age, and opportunity, but they share a common quality. They refuse the notion that the present order is the only imaginable one. For the enslaved, that refusal can be especially quiet and intense. A person lying under a rough blanket may calculate routes without moving a muscle. Which road bends toward the river? Which dogs in the neighbourhood bark at strangers and which grow lazy after midnight? Which moon phases leave too much light? Which white men drink heavily on Saturdays? Which free black household might dare to help? Which tree line offers cover? These are not fantasies in the decorative sense. They are acts of planning. Even if no flight comes tomorrow, the mind keeps drawing maps because the map itself is a form of moral resistance. It says there is another direction besides obedience. Others think less about leaving and more about enduring. Endurance can sound passive to people who have never had to practice it seriously. In truth, it takes immense discipline. A mother may decide that survival, for now, means staying near her children no matter how bitter the conditions. An elderly man may know his strength no longer suits long travel, and instead focus on teaching names, routes, and stories to the young. A free black worker facing northern exclusion may choose to save coin by coin, not because the process is dignified, but because household stability is worth the humiliation endured to protect it. To continue under pressure without allowing pressure to define the soul is its own demanding art. Faith often joins these late-hour reflections. Night prayers are different from the words spoken in a meeting. They can be smaller, barer, more direct. Keep my child safe. Let my husband return. Give me strength to hold my tongue tomorrow. Guard the one on the road. Help me not to despair. Forgive my anger. Remember the dead. Show me what to do. Such prayers may be whispered aloud, mouthed silently, or carried only in breath. They do not always ask for miracles. Often they ask for enough courage to face another ordinary day under extraordinary burden. That is a humble request. It is also a massive one. There is a physical side to these night hours that history can easily overlook. The body after labour does not settle elegantly. Feet throb, wrists ache, shoulders knot with dull heat. A child turns in sleep and presses a warm heel into another sleeper's side. Mosquitoes whine. Fabric scratches. Smoke catches faintly in the throat. Winter brings cold seeping through cracks. Summer brings air so thick it seems to rest on the skin. Rest, when it comes, must pass through these sensations. Even comfort has to negotiate with discomfort first. For free, black Americans, especially in northern cities, night thoughts can hold a different but related strain. Freedom carries aspiration, and aspiration invites worry. Will the school keep its teacher? Can the church meet the rent? Will the sun find a trade or be shut out again? Will the paper arrive with news of another riot, another denial, another law narrowing the path? Will hard-won respectability protect the family at all, or simply make them more visible? Yet with these worries come acts of deliberate hope. A mother sets aside a cleaner shirt for Sunday. A father sharpens a pencil stub for a child learning sums. A young woman studies borrowed pages by candlelight. A minister revises tomorrow's remarks. A printer folds sheets that argue for black rights in language too firm to be mistaken. Hope here is not dreamy softness. It is organized persistence. Children, when half asleep, often reveal the emotional truth of a household. One mumbles a question about someone absent. Another clutches a scrap doll, a carved toy, a folded rag, anything that makes the dark more familiar. Older children may pretend sleep while listening to adult voices gauge the next day's dangers. They absorb tone before meaning. They can hear whether the world feels steady or trembling. Yet childhood also insists on its own small recoveries. A game remembered, a silly nickname repeated once more, a bedtime song, a whispered joke, even under pressure. Children remain inconveniently alive to delight, and that may be one of the finest rebukes oppression ever receives. There is also thinking done in couples, in low voices after the room has grown still. A husband and wife separated by labour all day may exchange the real conversation now. What did you hear? Who was seen with the trader? How bad is the debt? Did the preacher say anything useful? Should we trust that man? Can we send word to your brother? Will the child be ready for service soon? What can be hidden? What can be saved? Intimacy under danger often becomes practical without losing tenderness. A hand reaches in the dark. A silence rests between two people who already understand too much. A plan takes shape from fragments. A curious detail from the era captures how powerful these private worlds could be. Some black families and communities preserved family information in remembered recitations, spoken lists of names, relations, places, and distinguishing details repeated often enough to outlast paper loss. It could sound simple to an outsider. It was anything but simple. To recite kin accurately in a world committed to scattering them was an act of historical care. Memory became archive. The human voice became registry. Historians still debate how widely hope for broad social change spread among ordinary black Americans by 1840, because evidence is uneven and often filtered through hostile records. Some white observers insisted the enslaved thought only of daily needs. Many black testimonies, later recollections, church records, and community writing suggest a much fuller emotional and political horizon. People could think about tomorrow's breakfast and distant freedom in the same breath. They could worry over a sick child and dream of an end to slavery. The narrowness lies not in their imagination, but in the records kept by those who preferred not to see it. Night can bring fear as well. Footsteps outside too late. A horse stopping near the house. A knock after dark. Sudden shouting from the road. Firelight where no fire should be. The heart reacts before the mind assembles facts. Many black households know this sensation too well. Control has taught the body to expect interruption. Yet even here, community matters. Someone listens at the door. Someone gathers the children closer. Someone knows which neighbour might come if called. Fear is less lonely when shared, though not less real. And then there is the question that hovers over all these hours. What will become of us? It is a personal question and a collective one. What will become of this family, this child, this church, this neighbourhood, this people? The answer in 1840 is not visible with any certainty. Slavery is entrenched. Racism is national. Law is uneven. Violence is near. Wealth flows upward through black labour while rights remain withheld. The facts are harsh and still. Black Americans continue imagining continuance, not because evidence guarantees it, but because surrendering the future entirely would hand too much to those already claiming everything else. Hope in such a world is rarely loud. It does not always announce itself in speeches. Sometimes it is a woman teaching a child a proper signature. Sometimes it is a man keeping his tools in good order, because skill may yet open a door. Sometimes it is a grandmother repeating the names of scattered kin until the youngest can say them back without error. Sometimes it is money hidden in cloth. Sometimes it is a prayer spoken every night for years. Sometimes it is simply the decision to rise in the morning without giving one's inner life over to bitterness or numbness. That may sound modest. It is not. The emotional range of these final waking hours is wide. Weariness, grief, desire, resentment, humour, piety, memory, longing, calculation, and tenderness all pass through the same room. Someone laughs softly at a remark too sharp to waste. Someone weeps without sound. Someone stares at the ceiling and counts small resources. Someone thinks of the stars. Someone thinks of the dead. Someone thinks of a future child not yet born and wonders whether that child might live under different terms. Night gathers all of it without resolving very much. Outside, the world continues almost indifferently. Wind moves through leaves. Water shifts in a bucket. A shutter taps once, then rests. The moon, if visible, lays pale light across packed earth, fence posts, roof edges, and the curve of a road that could lead anywhere or nowhere. Nature offers no direct justice. It does, however, provide continuity. Dawn will come. That simple fact can feel cruel or merciful depending on the day. Often it is both. So the final thoughts of Black Americans in 1840 are not passive endings to a difficult day. They are the hidden labour of meaning-making in a life pressed hard by control. In darkness, people remember who has been taken and who remains. They measure danger and possibility. They comfort children, consult spouses, recite names, whisper prayers, rehearse plans, and hold on to hopes that would look too vulnerable in full daylight. Nothing is guaranteed, very little is safe, yet the mind keeps moving toward connection, dignity, and tomorrow. That movement is quiet, but it is powerful. It is how people remain human in circumstances built to deny their full humanity, and it is how the night, even at its heaviest, can still carry the faint outline of morning. Now the room grows softer around you. The sounds that felt sharp begin to blur into one low hush. Breathing evens out. The boards beneath you hold their patient stillness. The air cools just enough to feel kind. Whatever fear waits beyond the walls, it cannot fill every corner of this moment. Here, in the slow drift of night, names are still remembered. Hands still reach for one another in the dark. A prayer, once spoken, lingers gently in the mind like the last warmth of a fire. You let the day loosen its grip. The fields, the roads, the watchful eyes, the hard rules, the aching work, all begin to recede into a distant murmur. In their place come quieter things. A child sleeping deeply, a lamp nearly out, the faint scent of wood smoke and worn cloth, the soft weight of memory settling without urgency. Somewhere outside, leaves stir and settle again, as if the earth itself were breathing more slowly. You do not need to solve the whole future tonight. It is enough to rest beside the hope of it, enough to feel that even in an age of control, people carried songs, prayers, plans, humour, and love further than cruelty expected. Enough to know that dignity survived in whispered names, in careful teaching, in shared bread, in hidden courage, and in the simple act of imagining another dawn. So let the darkness grow gentle now. Let the voices fade. Let the road disappear into quiet. The night stretches softly above cabins, city rooms, churchyards, rivers, and fields, covering all things in one calm shade. And as sleep comes closer, the world grows less harsh for a little while, until even history seems to lower its voice, and rest, at last, becomes possible.